Thank you, Kim. So one of the buttons at the bottom is called chat, and if you click on that, it looks like a speech bubble with 3 dots in it. It will open up a chat window to the side. We will use this for typing in questions, but right now we're going to use it for check-in. So I invite you now to type into the chat box where you are physically, what town, what state, as well if you'd like to name your congregation and your faith tradition, and then we will get an idea of where everybody here is participating from and which faith traditions are represented. So go ahead and type into the chat box once you have that open. Good morning, Kelly. Thank you for being here today. Good morning, Peter. Morning, Kim and Carrollton. Okay. Virginia Beach and Lynchburg. McLean, Williamsburg. Christiansburg, UU Congregation of the New River Valley. Albuquerque, the congregation where I did my internship some years ago. Texas, Forest, Virginia, and the Lynchburg UU congregation. Hampton, Maryland. Well, good morning, everybody. Again, thank you for being here today.
Can't hear a bloody thing.
Somebody's still having difficulty getting their speakers working. If you are having difficulty hearing on your computer, check the audio output, particularly if you have another screen or something or another device, including a microphone plugged into it. Sometimes a computer will think that a microphone is actually a speaker, but of course it won't actually play any sound. That was one of the pieces of troubleshooting we did yesterday. Okay, so as people continue to arrive, let's move on. So let me talk about the background of this workshop today. I'm at the UU Fellowship of the Peninsula in Newport News, and a number of years ago my congregation submitted a Green Sanctuary Action Plan. Green Sanctuary is a program of the Unitarian Universalist Association to help congregations become more green, basically, through a variety of efforts. And so the fellowship here in Newport News, Virginia, applied for this and completed some of the projects that we had said we were going to do. Another option, if your computer doesn't want to connect with sound, is to connect by phone instead. That is an option as well. Again, the toolbar at the bottom of the screen, next to mute where there's that up arrow, one of the options there should be switch to phone audio, and then you can call in. So, as I said, we completed some of the steps in our action plan to become a green sanctuary, and then for various reasons, we got caught up in other priorities. But recently, we were looking at the plan, hoping to reinvigorate it and complete it to gain certification as a green sanctuary. And one of the things that we said we were going to do some years ago was host a green living and congregational sustainability workshop. So we were looking at that, and the proposal was to host it here, to invite people from all over Virginia to participate, to include other groups as well. And it occurred to us that asking people to spend an hour or 2 hours or more in the car driving to come to a workshop to talk about being green didn't make a whole lot of sense. Particularly since in the years since we had submitted our action plan, technology had advanced to the place where we could hold a meeting, a workshop like this, without needing people to drive. People could connect from their computers, even from their phones, thanks to the development in technology over the last few years. So we decided to redesign this workshop to do it using Zoom as what seems to be one of the better platforms out there. Still not perfect in terms of some of the technological challenges. I've spent a lot of this week fighting with those, but that seems to always be on the individual computer end rather than Zoom itself. This last year, I also began as a Green Faith Fellow, and I'm very grateful to David, Corey, and Kelly, who were in the same group as me, becoming Green Faith Fellows, for their participation today. And as part of being a Green Faith Fellow, we talked about projects that we could undertake as part of that development process. And so it seemed natural to me to make my project this workshop that my congregation had talked about organizing anyway. So that is the background for where we are today. As I say, I'm very grateful to my fellow Green Faith Fellows for being part of this, for the support I've had from the Green Faith Fellowship Program over the last year to do this, for the assistance of Virginia Interfaith Power and Light for getting the word out about this, and of course the support from the UU Fellowship here in Newport News for helping me to do this too. Regarding context, some of you may know that this is a big weekend, not just here in Hampton Roads in Southeast Virginia, but really for the whole nation. There is a big series of events. It actually started on Thursday, and I believe continues in some ways into next week, but the big events as part of this are today and tomorrow. And this is the 400th commemoration of the arrival, the unwilling bringing of Africans to English North America, the people who became the first slaves in the United States. And so there's, as I say, a pretty much a week, but certainly this weekend of events commemorating this, acknowledging the struggles and the difficulties, but also celebrating in many ways African-American culture as an integral part of American culture. And in particular, those of you who are here from faith communities, I want to draw your attention to the national bell ringing that is taking place tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. This is Eastern time, but outside of the East Coast, maybe local time. And congregations and others with bells are invited to ring those bells for 4 minutes at 3 p.m. to commemorate this 400th anniversary. This is being organized by the National Park Service. There's also a National 1619 Commission that was signed into law a couple of years ago that is organizing a lot of this. And the intention is to ring bells continuously for 4 minutes, 1 minute for each century. And a number of us from here will be going down to Fort Monroe, but you are invited to participate in this from wherever you are. So I hope you will consider doing that. I have a prayer to get us started this morning. This was a prayer from that was actually collected by the Interfaith Power and Light affiliate in New Mexico. Reading this, they have a bell that I'm going to ring 4 times, not for 4 minutes, but 4 times to show that we are part of what's going on this weekend, that we recognize the significance of these events and how all of it, from the events 400 years ago to what we are doing now to try and become more green, is all a piece of our history and our culture that we are trying to improve, make amends for, and find a better way forward for all of us. We hold the earth. We hold our siblings and cousins, our friends and family who suffer from storms and droughts intensified by climate change. We hold all species who suffer. We hold world leaders delegated to make decisions for life, for all life. We pray that the web of life may be mended through courageous actions to limit carbon emissions worldwide. We pray for right actions for adaptation and mitigation to help our already suffering Earth community. We pray that love and wisdom might inspire our actions as individuals and as communities, so that we may with integrity look into the eyes of friends and family, siblings and cousins, and all beings, and truthfully say, we are doing our part to care for them and the future of our children. May love transform us and our world with new steps toward life. Amen, and blessed be. So I want to take a moment to talk about how we are going to run questions and discussion today, because with a group this size, as you've already seen, we can't really just have everybody turn their microphones on and then go at it. That won't work. So we are going to use the chat box, which hopefully you have open still from when you checked in and told us where you are and where you came from. So please keep the chat panel open, because that's how we're going to be managing questions during the presentations, at least at the beginning. So during the presentation, you can type questions into the chat panel. If you are not participating individually, but as a group, you'll need to have somebody in your group willing to be the typist as questions come up in your group. I'm going to help our presenters by moderating the questions. particularly if a number of them are all on a very similar topic. If there's anything that comes up immediately in terms of needing clarification, I'll interrupt our presenter to ask for that. But otherwise, we'll deal with questions towards the end. And once the presentation is done and the questions in the chat panel have been addressed, we'll then open up the discussion for any others that remain. Another one of the buttons at the bottom of your screen is called Manage Participants or Participants. I guess I see Manage, but you'll just see Participants. Having that open will give you the option of raising your hand, and then I will take those in turn and ask people to unmute. You're also going to want to be on speaker view, particularly for the screen sharing. There is a way to make the chat box pop out and either have it by the side of the main Zoom window so that, yeah, it's not hidden when the screen is shared. So you should be able to make the chat box come out the side or in its own window, depending on your computer. We will have half an hour for each presentation, including time for questions and discussion. And so I asked for your help in keeping us all on track this morning so that we can do that. So our first presentation is Tips to Green Your Congregation with Corey Majid, who is a Green Faith Fellow in the same class as me this year. So I'm very glad that Corey is getting us started this morning. Let me bring up Corey's bio. Okay, so Corey writes that she is a homeschool educator, Girl Scout troop leader, fund starter, and founder of Green Ramadan, which we will see a video about in a moment. A mostly social media-based platform encouraging Muslims to eat mindfully and tread lightly during one of the most sacred months of the Islamic calendar. She adds that on paper, she seems like an extrovert. It was very good to get to know Corey over this last year, to participate in particular with some of the Ramadan observances when the Green Faith Fellows met in May. So I am very happy to welcome Corey to be part of this today. So let me get ready. Corey, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I know you can't talk, but hey. So is the audio okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Oh, you want to go ahead and start the video?
No, it ran itself automatically. Okay. So you want to do the video?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's start with that.
Ramadan is special to me because eating together as a community, it's really beautiful. My name is Corey Majid, and I started greenramadan.com, and I have to say my age. My mission is to remind Muslims to tread lightly on the earth and eat mindfully during Ramadan. It's that time where we're waiting for the adhan, the call to prayer, so that we can break our fast. There is a table spread, and they had, little styrofoam bowls filled up with like banana and dates. They used that little cup for less than a minute and just threw it away. I was appalled. Ramadan is a time for being more mindful, but then every night for 30 nights, we're throwing all this away as a community. And I was disgusted, and I said, I can't be part of that. I had to make a change. So I started researching something that's portable and durable, and I came up with the zero trash iftar kits. We have a stainless steel divided food tray, the bamboo cutlery set, a BPA-free tumbler, and lastly, a cloth napkin. There's lots of great ways to make your Ramadan great. One is just use reusables, because we're throwing away lots of disposables every night. Another way is we have to make a ritual purification called wudu before we pray. We have to wash our hands, wash our face, mouth. So there are some people who turn the tap all the way on, right? And the bathroom ends up looking like a swimming pool. So make wudu with as little water as possible. Another way is to eat local and organic food, because the food is not being trucked. Muslims contacted me personally saying, yeah, we're interested in this too. We're doing this at our mosque too. Young people, they're inheriting this planet. They have to make these new habits like the norm. Like recycling, that's a minimum. That's what we do.
All right. Shall I get started?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring up your presentation.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. So I'd like to share with you all ways that you can green your congregation. I'm going through the process with my congregation, and we're making progress. So, and these things I'm going to share with you, you're not going to do them because they're easy, although some of them are, and you're not going to be doing these things because they're convenient, although some of them can be convenient, but you're going to be doing these things because it's a way for you all, for us all, to express our faith, and by being considerate of our shared planet. And you're also showing, or we are also showing our gratitude to our Creator for the many, many blessings that we've given. So to start us off, I want to share with you a concept called ecological footprint that was by I found at the Global Footprint Network. So an ecological footprint is the land and the water area that we need to produce the resources that we use. And so the Global Footprint Network, they did a case study on the ecological footprint per person of each state in the U.S., including the District of Columbia. So before we go to the next slide, maybe people could, in the chat box, they could give a guess of which state, including the district, has the highest ecological footprint. Anybody want to take a guess? Okay, I see DC, California, Texas, New York, Texas. Okay, these big. Oh, somewhere. It's interesting that people said DC. That's interesting. West Virginia. Okay, and we are talking per person, so DC could definitely be up there. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So let's talk about the U.S. first. So the U.S. population in general uses 2 times the renewable resources and services already. So we're already at a deficit. So the largest per person ecological footprint is the state with that is Virginia. So if you're in Virginia, congratulations, you're number 1. But also it's Maryland and Delaware, and yes, the District of Columbia. So the Delmarva area, including DC, these are the states and the district with the largest per person ecological footprint. So all us people from Virginia and Maryland and Delaware, we need to be here. We need to be aware of this. Just by living in these states, our ecological footprint is probably pretty high. So let's look at a country, well, a world view. So the Global Footprint Network also does something that is called the what is that? The Country Overshoot Day. So let's just say that in the beginning of the year, each country gets all the resources that it needs to, feed and take care of all of its citizens. So I don't know if you all can see that, depending on the size of your screen, but if every country gets everything that it needs at the beginning of the year, the US would run out by March 15th. We would completely use all of our resources by March 15th. So we couldn't even make it past the first quarter. The country with the highest, with the soonest, the overshoot day that is the soonest, is Qatar. So this little bitty country in the Gulf, they would run out of their resources by February 11th. And another interesting thing to me is that another Muslim country, Qatar is a Muslim country, but another Muslim country, Indonesia, has like the best overshoot day. They didn't make it to the end of the year, but Indonesia, their overshoot day is December 18th. So they could, using the resources just within its borders, they could feed everyone and provide all the resources that they need for all of their citizens all the way to December 18th. They could almost make it through the whole year. So we all have, some work to do. So another thing that the Global Footprint Network has is an opportunity for you to calculate your own personal ecological footprint. I took their quiz. You weren't supposed to show that yet. I took their quiz, but and I thought, I'm green. I compost, I recycle, I use reusables. I'm good. But I also live in Maryland, and I drive a lot because it's easier to get around. So when I calculated my personal Earth overshoot day, I found out that if everyone lived like me, we would need 2.2 Earths. And I was like, wow, it's so humbling. It's so humbling. But the only solace I took was that at least my personal Earth overshoot day is after the US. So the US, Earth overshoot day for the US was March 15th. Mine is June 14th. So at least I'm a little better than my country. But we all have some work to do. So later on at the end of this presentation, I'll give you a link so you can calculate your own personal Earth overshoot day and see where you need to do some work. And we all need to do some work. So let's get started, and we can talk about how you can help green your congregation. So The first thing, and I think it's one of the most important things, is to use reusables. When you're having any type of event, as much as possible, everything you should have, everything that you're providing should be reusable. So we're talking about plates, cups, even napkins, utensils, everything should be, as much as possible, should be reusable. Another way you can do that is to put food on platters. So speaking of putting food on platters, I've spent some time in Senegal in West Africa, and I would go to dinners at people's houses. And so everyone doesn't get a plate. Usually they bring out these huge platters, probably is almost as big as probably a coffee table. And it would have, everything in the meal on it. So it'd be some rice, maybe some chicken, maybe some vegetables, all on the plate. And we would gather around the plate. So maybe it'll be 30, 40 people, and we will have like 5 platters or so. And so we would gather around the platter, and we would all eat from the same platter. So eating as a community is a special thing, but eating as a community from the same, platter, it makes it even more special, and you get to really know people who you eat with. So you could set food on platters where it'll be like vegetables or fruit or anything. If you want to go ahead and do it Senegalese style, go ahead and put the whole meal on a platter and share it like that. That'd be a fun thing to do. Maybe if you eat an Ethiopian food, you probably eaten from the same platter. So you might have had that experience already. So another thing to do, instead of providing everyone with their own individual disposable water bottles, put drinks, tap water. If you want tap water, put tap water in pitchers and, pour it in your cup, pour it in cups. So you don't have this. I know when my community has an event and everyone has their own individual water bottles, there's usually people forget. And so there's water bottles filled with water and no one wants to drink it. You don't know whose it is. Nobody wants to get cooties. And so the water is wasted. And also a lot of times the disposable water bottle is not recycled. So another way to get rid of that is try to put your drinks in pitchers. The next one. Another way you can bring your congregation is to have vegetarian meals. So in the Muslim community, if we had a vegetarian meal without informing people ahead of time, there would be probably be an uproar. So I don't know how it is in your community, but in mine, going vegetarian, it's a big deal. But at least we can start with something like Meatless Mondays. That's something that's been, going around the world, and people are probably still pretty familiar with that, and maybe they'll be willing to do a Meatless Mondays. And people can do Meatless Mondays at home as well. So eating vegetarian once a week is better for our health and the planet. And especially in this time when the Amazon is burning, and it's burning because they're trying to clear land so they can, pasture cows so we can have meat, because we have a huge, we want our burgers. So, but just think about just chilling on the meat at least once a week can have a positive impact. Next slide. Another thing we can do is try to eat local and organic food. And I think a really cool way to have people in your community eat local and organic food is to have a 100-mile potluck. So people bring food to the potluck just like they would at any potluck. But the condition is anything that you bring has to have been produced within 100 miles of your congregation. So you can really find out, what's in your community. And you can find out, you can support local businesses, support local farms, and, it helps your community to figure out, what is local, what's in season. Another thing is that some people have allergies, and it's recommended that they eat local honey, because the honeybees, they're taking, pollen from what's local to you. So it can be helpful to eat, local honey. So using local, seasonal, and organic fruits and vegetables, visiting a farm to see, where the free range meat, how cows, free range cows live, or free range lamb or something like that. Another cool way is to start or join a CSA, community supported agriculture, at your congregation. So if you're worshiping on Sunday, or you're worshiping on Saturday or Friday, after your worship service, you can pick up your CSA, your fruits and vegetables, for the week or for the next 2 weeks. So the next way you can green your congregation is for the leaders, people who give the sermons, they have to talk about earth care and environmental stewardship, environmental justice. We really need to hear these green messages from the leaders of our communities. But if you're not a leader of a community, another thing you could do is to share eco tips in your announcements and e-newsletters. And you could start a sacred scripture study group. You can look in your sacred books and see what has our Creator told us about our nature, told us about our responsibility to nature, to animal life, to plants. So we really need to start a conversation within our communities and hear from our leaders what our faith says about environmental stewardship. And something that is very important, also very important, all of this is important, right? Is to start a green team. There are certain people who are, so excited and about bringing this to their communities, and we can't do it alone. So we need to start green teams at our congregations. It could start with 2 people. It could start with 3. But as long as you're not doing it alone, so you don't burn out. And these green teams, they're going to raise awareness about climate change and climate issues. They could, share, news. Another thing is that you want to pair education with action. So if you have watching a documentary, you have a climate movie night, or some type of green movie night. If you have a documentary about single-use plastics, you want to pair that with action to reduce the single-use plastics in your congregation. And another thing I found is that you want to start with low-hanging fruits. You want to get some quick, easy wins to keep the momentum going and keep the interest going in your community, and also, get some quick wins. So along with the green team, I want to share some quick wins that you can do with your green team. So one of the things is that you can start, a bulletin board in your congregation and post articles about, what's happening in green circles, the good and the bad, just to, keep people, to build awareness. You can first get an energy audit to see where your congregation's building is weak and where it needs some improvements. And some of that can be easy. It could be as easy as changing, you could start with something as easy as changing your incandescent lighting to CFL or LED lighting. Like I mentioned earlier, you could do a green movie night or a green film festival. You can plant a pollinator garden with native plants and flowers, because our native animals, our native insects, they need our native plants and flowers. It can be in ground, or it could be just, a huge pot just to start with, as a part of welcoming all of God's creation to your sacred ground. You can get the cleaning crew to use green cleaning products without, so harsh chemicals aren't going into our watershed and our waterways. A really fun way, I think, to celebrate being green is to worship outdoors. It doesn't even have to be, a green themed worship service, but just the fact that you're worshiping outdoors, out of the AC, in creation, dealing with the wind and the sun and bugs. It can be definitely a memorable event. Kind of like a revival, and you're outside and you can hear like the chirp of crickets and stuff like that. It adds a certain ambiance to the event, and it can definitely make it memorable. What I've seen some congregations do is have water bottles printed with the congregation's logo, and so to encourage people to bring their own water bottle. So if they have that water bottle and it's at home and they're about to go to a service, they'll see that water bottle with the church or the mass logo on it and be like, oh, let me fill up my water bottle. Let me bring it. Another easy or quick win was to install rain barrels. I know in my area, you can actually get rebates for installing rain barrels on your home. So there can be a rain barrel. You can put together the rain barrel and install it at your home, and you can get a rebate that can basically pay for it. And so you can do that also at your congregation and use the water in the rain barrel to water your local gardens. Another great way is for the congregation to take a field trip to experience the beauty of God's creation. So those are some quick wins for your green team. So earlier I mentioned the Global Footprint Network and a way that you can try to calculate your own ecological footprint. So you can write down footprintcalculator.org and go there later and see how many Earths that we need to live like you. So this year, the Earth Overshoot Day for 2019 was July 29th. So by July 29th, we have used all the resources that could grow in this year to live. So we've run out in July 29th. Unfortunately, each year that date, that Earth Overshoot Day, is getting a little bit later. So we really have to, reflect on that. Our actions individually and collectively, they can have an effect. And with these tips, our effect can be more positive for us and for our planet. So that's it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Corey.
Yeah.
So we had a couple of comments in the chat box. Yeah, Dan said local honey does help people with allergies. As you said, Corey, with what the bees collect from local plants, that helps. Kelly pointed out that in some states you can't actually have a water barrel. I know when we lived in Colorado, we found out that the state had pre-sold its rainwater to other places that were downriver. And yeah, David posted the link to the footprint calculator in the chat. Okay, so here at the fellowship, there was a question for Corey. How has your congregation responded to your efforts? I mean, in the video, it looked like you were handing out the reusables for a meal. How has the congregation as a whole responded to your efforts to become more green? Corey?
Okay. So before I approached my congregation, I lived what I was preaching. So whenever I would go to, there's for those who don't know, Ramadan is a month in the Islamic calendar, and for 29 or 30 days, we're fasting from sunrise to sunset. And after sunset, we break our fast, and we usually eat in community. Usually, just about every mosque has a meal for anybody to come in. Muslims especially, because we've been fasting, but anybody can come in and eat. So when we eat this way, there's lots of waste. So there's plates and cups and cutlery that's being thrown away every day for 30 days as a congregation. So, but like I said, like you saw in the video, I was like, I'm not doing that. So when I would come to any mosque that I would go to, or any dinner that I would be invited to during Ramadan, I would bring my own tray. I would bring my own food tray, stainless steel food tray. I would bring my own cutlery. I would bring my own cups. So they would see me and they were like, oh, okay, there's Corey. That's pretty cool, while they're continuing to eat from their plate, their paper plate and their plastic forks. They're like, oh, that's pretty cool. So people would see me in the community. And so finally, I became a Green Face Fellow. And then I was like, oh, I have a little clout. I have, Green Face Fellow behind my name. Maybe I could do something with that. So I approached my mosque and I said, I'd like to help our congregation become green. And they were like, we've been looking for someone to do that. So it was wonderful. They've been supported. I have the support of the board. The board asked me, what I need, what I would like to do. The most recent thing. So last Ramadan, I just wanted a small win, and I just wanted my congregation to stop using styrofoam, and they did. It was wonderful. So we're using plastic now, but at least we're not using styrofoam. And they also actually revamped their recycling program. So in some congregations, they have, blue bins, but they don't do anything with it. So we'll have a blue bin and then trash will go in it. So it was like, what is this? So they have started, recycling more. Wonderful. I wanted some small wins. Most recently, they allowed me, we just had an Eid celebration. So to celebrate the end of the Hajj season. So they allowed me to set up near the table where people were getting food on their plastic plates and cutlery. And they allowed me to pitch people in the line, hey, would you like to buy this fork that, it's a fork, it's a knife, it's a spoon. Would you like to buy this fork to use today at Eid and also every day? So they allowed me to pitch to the people while they were getting their food. So they're pretty open, and like I said, we're taking baby steps to change the culture in our mosque.
Great. Seth asked a question. How about carpooling?
Yeah, absolutely. Carpooling to church, carpooling to your place of worship is great. In the DC area where my mosque is, it's actually probably really good because parking can be really tight. So carpooling, taking the bus, taking the train. Actually in Islam, you actually get blessings for walking to the mosque on Friday. You actually get blessings. So it's like a win-win situation. You're taking care of the planet, and you're also getting blessings from God for walking to the mosque.
Yeah. Great. We have time for maybe one more question if somebody has one. I don't see any hands up. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Corey, for being part of it this morning, for getting us started.
Thank you.
There's certainly a number of aspects that you talked about that we're going to look at in some of the other presentations, but thank you for getting us off to a great start this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next segment is actually a video from Living the Change, which is a program that is affiliated with Green Faith, with an emphasis on individual responsibility for becoming more green. Martin Kopp is their director, but he is in France, so he couldn't be part of this live, but he did record a video for us to see. So let me read you Martin's bio, and then we will get started on the video that he recorded for us. So Martin holds a doctorate in Protestant theology from the University of Strasbourg in France. He chairs the Commission on Ecology and Climate Justice at the French Protestant Federation and speaks at conferences around the country. He is a member of the Commission on Social, Economic and Political Affairs of his church. He served as the Climate Justice Advocacy Officer of the Lutheran World Federation. As such, he took an active part in these big international meetings that certainly have done a lot to address climate issues in recent years, called COP19, COP20, and COP21. You may be more familiar with some of these based on where they took place, places like Paris and Rio, and I believe one of them was in New York, and he'll refer to the one that's coming up that is now going to be in Chile, I believe next year. So let me bring up Martin's video, and then we can watch that together. If you have comments or thoughts, I can't really answer anything on behalf of Living the Change, but if there's anything you want to share, please do feel free to type that into the chat box, and then we'll have a few minutes after Martin's video to talk about it. You'll certainly see him talk about some of the things that Corey talked about as well, helping us consider these issues from various angles today. So here is Martin's video.
Hello, dear friends. Here is Martin Kopp speaking to you from a little village in France called Gries, close to Strasbourg in the east of France. It's a pleasure for me to be speaking to you today, and please receive my apologies for not being able to have joined you live through the internet, but Saturday was quite a packed day on my side. In any case, thank you very much to Andrew for inviting me to share today about this initiative that is called Living the Change. And it's a pleasure to be able to introduce it to you even from a distance and through this recording. But that's also the beauty of what the internet and technology allows today. So I would like to start by bringing you the key elements of Living the Change context. In 2018, we started Living the Change to take responsibility in the face of the climate emergency by reducing our personal carbon footprints and by fostering widespread behavior change in our communities. And it's important for me to underline to you at the outset that we are committing as religious and spiritual people to align ourselves with our deepest religious and spiritual beliefs and values. There are indeed people from all faith and spiritual traditions that take part in Living the Change: Christians, Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, Quakers, etc. And all these traditions agree that we share the responsibility to take good care of Earth, our common home, as Pope Francis says in his encyclical Laudato Si. We are all grateful for the blessings of life, which are expressed in all forms and all parts of our shared planet. We are inspired by how the earth sustains us and always evokes our recognition of something greater than ourselves. There's a spirituality in the relationship with earth itself. And we are called to honor our values and principles as persons of faith, including respect for all creation, compassion, solidarity, moderation, and balance, to use different keywords and key concepts from the different religious traditions. And you might have heard one that speaks particularly to you. And for us at Green Faith, and generally for all the partners of Living the Change, changing at the personal level towards what could be called a climate-friendly lifestyle is an important facet of our shared response to the climate crisis. And to be very clear at the outset, this initiative stands along complementary initiatives, of course, including technology innovation, policy and economic tools, local community leadership and action. So it's not that changing at the personal level is the only path. It is one aspect of the answer that goes together with collective action and action at the systemic and political level. However, even in the best case scenario, the consumption habits of many of us are simply too high. To allow a flourishing future for all and to take good care of the earth, our common home, we must change as well. So behavior change must be part of the solution. It matters because we have 12 years before reaching the 1.5 degrees of mean warming worldwide, and lifestyle change makes an impact immediately, while structural change takes time. It matters second because it accelerates cultural and political change. It challenges mainstream consumerism and it promotes joyful, simple living. In other words, individual change is not only about the individual, it also accelerates a cultural shift. And finally, it is key because it is simply the right thing to do. Walking the talk is not an option. We believe at Green Faith and at Living the Change that embodying our values and leading by example matter in their own stance. So through the lenses of faith, we understand climate-friendly living as a holistic concept and practice. It's not just about reducing the carbon emissions of the person, reducing the carbon footprint. It is also about living more connected, meaningful, and spiritually whole lives. It can provide a message to ourselves, of course, but also to others in our faith communities, to people in wider society, including policymakers. It's a message that we care about the world enough to make these choices, which sometimes come at a price for us, but also are conveying joys, and that doing so is a positive, meaningful experience that also brings about satisfaction and happiness. So our humble vision is one of millions of people of faith around the world adopting truly sustainable lifestyles, together contributing to the creation of a genuinely flourishing future. So what choices help us move towards these climate-friendly lifestyles? Let me try again. So Living the Change is based on a study that was published in 2017 in the journal named Environment Research Letters and written by Wines and Nicholas. And according to this study, transport, diet, and home energy use are the three areas in which behavior change have the highest impact. And I named them in decreasing order of impact. That is, transport has the highest impact, then diet, and finally, home energy use. On our website, you can find a nice infographic, which you can see here on the slide, that outlines possible changes in these priority sectors. And you might be surprised to see, for example, that using LED bulbs at home has a very small impact when moving towards a car-free life is the single most effective way to reduce your personal carbon footprint. And you can see other changes you can make. Eat a plant-based diet, which is also in the high impact category. Avoid one transatlantic flight. And on the other hand, you can see, for example, that recycling or hanging your dry clothes only has a moderate impact. And this visual here, many people find very interesting and informationful. It's true that we don't necessarily have these figures in our minds. Remember that these are average figures for developed countries. And so, of course, as we come from different contexts, it might differ a little bit from one place to another if you go and check the figures in your own country or your own region. But this is the best available data on average in developed countries that allows to have a general broad view. So as living the change, based on the one hand on our faith and spiritual grounding, based on the other hand on the best available science and figures, we are inviting you to embark on a spiritual journey of faith and action. And this in 6 possible ways. The first 3 of them are gathered on the homepage of our website, which I am showing you as I speak. And first of all, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter. By doing so, you will join the global community, you will be in a relationship with us, and you will get our news and resources firsthand. Second, and most importantly, we invite you to make a pledge to make your own life a blessing for the earth and all people. It is, so to speak, a declaration of spiritual intention to make changes in your life to reduce your carbon footprint. And you can see here that, so you put in your first name, your last name, you provide your email, you can choose your tradition, there's a drop-down menu, your country, etc. You see here that I'm based in France. And either you leave the pledge as it is, make my life a blessing for the earth, and you click on make my pledge, or you can actually write it down in your own words, using language that is meaningful to you, maybe that reflects your faith tradition. You're free either to use the words, very short sentence that we provide, or to use your own ideas and language. Beyond the pledge, of course, the time comes to walk the talk. And we invite you to make a commitment. So, as you can see here in our commitment tool, you can click on one of the 3 main areas, energy, transport, or diet. For this example, I've clicked on diet, and you can see that it's in bright colors, and you have a small paragraph explaining you the impact of this area. Again, you fill out the form. If you fill the pledge first, you don't need to refill the form, but well, that's a bit of details. And you can write down your commitment, as you see in the right-hand side in the bottom. So you can write it in your own words again. Say you decide that now, for example, once per week, you will not drive your children to school, but you will cycle there with them. Or you decide that one day per week, you will go to the office with public transport, or you decide that you're going to cut your meat consumption by half, whatever the commitment. The fact that you can write it down gives you the freedom to actually really have a personalized commitment. If you're looking for suggestions, you can click on Find Suggestions here. So on the left side of the screen, in the bottom, and you find a whole list of suggestions that we provide as Living the Change to inspire you. But this is not enough for us ambitious people. For research shows, and we have learned time and again, that to sustain a commitment and to manage to walk on the path of change in a good spirit, it is best to do so in a group. And to be accompanied and to help you to reach out to other people, we are providing 2 great activities. The first one of them is Living the Change suppers. A supper offers one the possibility to engage friends and or members of your religious and spiritual communities. It's one of the oldest and simplest practices of humanity. Gather for a savory meal and good conversation. It's not because I'm a French person that I'm saying this. I would also say gather around a nice glass of wine, of course. But I know not everybody drinks wine, so I'm respectful of all practices. And I would download our guidebook on the dedicated page on our website. You can see here that you can click on the blue button to download the guidebook. And why not become the host of a supper yourself? And this is something that we invite you to do in particular. And actually, the moment when I'm introducing Living the Change this year is very good. We invite you to do it during what we call Time for Living the Change. Time for Living the Change is a time during the year when hundreds of events happen around the globe dedicated to the topic of faith, answer to the climate emergency, and lifestyles. This year, Time for Living the Change will happen from September 1 to December 31, so throughout the end of the year. And it's a period of 4 months that includes the COP in Chile, which is in the first 2 weeks of December, and which could provide a very good hook to organize local events. During this month, we invite people of faith and spirit to host in-person events. It can be a supper, can be a community event, can be another kind of in-person event, where people can have a conversation about climate-friendly lifestyles, where they can celebrate around a plant-based meal, so either with very little, if no meat at all, or vegetarian, or even vegan, if you want to go all the way. When people are invited to hear from their religious leaders, hear their own commitments maybe, and possibly, because some of the groups locally do so, use this opportunity to advocate decision makers. For example, there was a meeting in Australia last year when an interfaith meeting of religious leaders that happened during Time for Living the Change that was dedicated to behavior change. Each religious leader made a commitment, and that happened in front of the parliament in Australia. And there was a meeting actually with MPs. So you can link very easily this behavior change area with systemic change by advocating. We are doing our bit, you have to do yours. Last year, more than 100 events were organized in 26 countries across 6 continents, and our ambition is to double the number of events this year in 2019. So stay tuned, check the website. In the coming couple of weeks, the page on Time for Living the Change will be completely renewed, brand new, and you will be able to download there all the resources necessary to organize a local event during this period of time. So my invitation is, why not think and become the local organizer of an event yourself? In any event, whether we are contemplating the possibility of making a pledge, of making a commitment, whether we are thinking about hosting a supper or a Time for Living the Change event, we all always need to be inspired. And that is why we have been gathering encouraging stories of change, where people like you and I share the narrative of their journey of change, and so in a very realistic, pragmatic, honest way. That means sharing both the joys, of course, of this journey of change, but also the difficulties, because it's not easy to change the way we live, to make decisions that may be, deciding not to go on a holiday in another country or to cut on meat consumption. And I come from Alsace in the east of France. We eat a lot of sauce. So it's easy. Acknowledging as a lot of our path of spiritual growth, this goes also a bit through a struggle. But it also comes with satisfaction and happiness in a simple lifestyle. So these stories of change are narratives or of the experiences of people and how their faith and their spirituality has been a motivation and a support on the way. So I would invite you to read their inspiring stories online. And why not, if you would be keen on telling us how you're experiencing change yourself, send us your own story. We are very much eager to learn and to hear from you. So that's the presentation of Living the Change. I hope that it was informative and that maybe it gave you a bit of appetite for this multi-faith initiative, which gathers partners from all faith traditions around the world and is gearing up to Time for Living the Change that begins, as I said, on September 1. So I hope that you have now a fruitful discussion together. I know Andrew has prepared a conversation on this matter of behavior change, its link with faith, and specifically also the Living the Change initiative. It would be a pleasure for me to be in touch with you to answer your questions if you have some. Andrew has my email address. And in any case, next step to you, go on the website, sign up on our newsletter. And in the first week of September, you get the first newsletter of Time for Living the Change and all information for our next step. So see you there. Bye-bye. Au revoir.
Okay, so that was the video that Martin from Living the Change recorded for us. I put together some questions for discussion for about 10 minutes until our next presentation. The website is livingthechange.net. Okay, so based on, if I get my screen sorted out, based on Martin's presentation, here are some questions, and I certainly invite you to type your answers into the chat box, or you can raise your hand on the participants list, and I will call upon you, and you can talk in real time to us. What surprises you about the various impacts of different personal choices as presented by Martin? Of the 3 high impact areas of transportation, diet, and home energy use, is there one that immediately appeals to you? Is there one that challenges you? Why? Is there a personal change you can picture yourself making, whether in full or as a horizon toward which to journey? And what is your growing edge when it comes to changing your lifestyle? Here at the fellowship, somebody typed in, carefree living requires not just individual action, but community action. Yes, individual action, systemic change, they have to go hand in hand. As Martin said, they have different timelines, but none of them is a substitute for the other. Certainly here in Southeast Virginia, in Hampton Roads, our public transportation system is lacking very badly. And for that matter, the neighborhoods getting around town, they're not walkable, and you can't really ride a bike very safely either. So we need changes to public transportation and to the design of our neighborhoods to allow more car-free travel. What we can do, though, is still be as efficient in our vehicle use as possible, collecting errands into a single trip. Carpooling is still a possibility. Some employers do offer that. You're, of course, always trading a little bit of convenience for efficiency. But as Martin said, to be able to do this is going to require some sacrifice on our part. We need much more emphasis on the dietary impacts on climate. Diet is an area where we can make much more of an immediate change. Yes, transportation is more challenging because it's dependent on roads and walkways and public transportation. But diet we're still limited by what's available in the supermarket, but we still have a lot more choice over what we eat. Corey talked about this in her presentation too. Trying to eat lower on the food chain rather than at the very top of the food chain. And certainly the major fires that are going on in the Amazon right now are a wake-up call when it comes to certainly beef consumption and how much of a toll that takes on the environment. Dan writes, how about working 4 10-hour days rather than 5 8-hour days? Takes 20% of the traffic off the system. Simply getting cars off the road would be a very good thing, especially around here. Some employers do offer the opportunity to work fewer, longer days. Telecommuting in some places is an option too. So there may be other possibilities for driving less, even though going completely car-free is not a possibility unless you happen to be in a big city with good public transportation. I know some of our discussions later today are going to talk about home energy use and energy use in congregations and what we can do to reduce those. Something else I also wanted to point out, yes, move towards electric cars, hybrid cars. I think that's something that our society as a whole is going to do sooner or later anyway, but the more of us who can be early adopters, the better. You may have seen on the chart that Martin showed that trash and recycling was fairly low down on the list as far as carbon impact was concerned, but we are all aware of the plastic problem that we have right now and the pollution of both land and ocean that is resulting from the amount of trash. So that may not be as big a problem specifically in regards to climate change and the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but trash and recycling are still very big issues when it comes to pollution. And so that's what our next presentation with Dan is going to talk about. Alan writes, I've considered solar panels at home. However, it would require the removal of 6 full-size trees and about the same number of half-grown trees. And he has not been able to find information on when this is ecologically sound. Yes, if you've got to cut down trees in order to be able to get enough sunshine on your roof or some other location for solar panels to work, that's then a trade-off of some sort that you have to figure out if it actually makes sense or not. However, there may be other ways, as somebody else responded, to invest in solar in places that are already in sunshine without having to cut down trees. So there may be some other options than everybody having their own solar panels. Again, here in Virginia, there are challenges thanks to Dominion. But again, we're moving steadily in that direction, and the more people who can be early adopters, the better. Martha writes, recycling markets are drying up now. We need to stop using single-use plastics instead of relying on recycling. Remember, out of reduce, reuse, and recycle, recycle is the third option. The first option is reduce. So the less we have to consume in the first place, the less we're going to have to get rid of once we're done using it. Okay, well, thank you all. I encourage you to look at the Living the Change website. There's a lot of resources on there that they are updating. I am making available various materials, including these videos, in a Google Drive folder that I'm going to send out to everybody after this workshop. And of course, the recording of the whole workshop as well, so that you can share that and so that people who couldn't make it can watch that too. And John writes, where would composting come in? yeah, doing whatever you can in your own home or your own congregation to compost the organic materials. Compost is then a great resource for your own gardening. Here at the Fellowship in Newport News, we started a community garden over the summer. And so we will definitely be using the compost we are making to go into that community garden. Okay, so our next presentation. I'm very pleased that Dan Baxter from Newport News has agreed to be part of this today. He's going to talk to us about the realities of waste management and recycling. Let me bring up Dan's bio. And then I will turn this over to him. So Dan is the Business Recycling and Outreach Coordinator for the City of Newport News. Knowing how these things work locally is really important. Dan represents the Public Works Department here to local and regional organizations, including the Denbigh Warwick Business Association in this part of town, the Virginia Peninsula Chamber of Commerce in the region, and the Advisory Board for Centura College. He serves on several boards and commissions, including askhrgreen.org, which is Hampton Roads trying to become more green, Keep Virginia Beautiful, Clean the Bay Day, which is about trying to recover some of the health of the Chesapeake Bay. And he recently retired as chair of the Virginia Beach Clean Community Commission. Recycling, and he is married to Ruby Arredondo, who was also on the was Clean Community Coordinator for the City of Virginia Beach. So I'm going to turn this over to Dan, if you would like to unmute yourself, and then it is all yours.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you.
Okay, good. Let's get to the presentation. First of all, it's an honor, Andrew, for you to bring me into this. Mostly because this is something that I have lived for well over 50 years. I come from a little community in Pennsylvania that some of you in southeastern and northern Virginia may recognize the name because it's the name of a convenience store. So I grew up in and near Wawa, Pennsylvania. So what we're going to do is, in that particular part of Pennsylvania is actually about 20 minutes outside of Center City, Philadelphia. And conservation there was something that we grew up with from the very, as soon as we could walk and talk. So let's get into this. The first scene you see here, if you look at the top right, is an overhead view of about 258 acres of prime real estate in the city of Newport News.
Dan, you haven't shared your screen yet.
Oh, wait a minute. And how do I do that? Wait a minute.
In the toolbar at the bottom, the green logo that says share screen.
Whoops. Okay. My bad.
It's okay.
We did this in practice and it was fine. Share screen. Okay, why? Oh, let's see. Oh, there it is. My bad. Is it working now?
It is starting up.
Okay, good.
There we go.
All right. Here we go. So what you see at the top right of the screen is our landfill that we used for 14 years. It's about a 250-acre facility. 238 is the actual landfill. So we'll talk about what our outlook is, what our operational needs are, what we actually do for the citizens of Newport News, shared resources, which is what we do with the community, including the faith-based community. We're going to show you what can happen to a landfill after it's shut down. And then we'll summarize and look at some future options for land use management and waste management and recycling. The City of Newport News Solid Waste Division provides waste and recycling services to over 43,000 households every week. We provide 3 different services. We provide automated waste collection, we provide bulk waste collection, and we also provide recycling for those 43,000 individual residences. We operate recovery conversion operations for tree branches and leaf and grass material, which we make into mulch and compost. We manage the 238-acre closed landfill in Denby, and we are currently in the process towards the end of the shutdown process to convert that landfill into a recreational park and opportunity for people to use a facility that's actually quite large for a whole bunch of different purposes. The last thing we talk about is that we are constantly evaluating new technologies to include them in the waste reduction and resource recovery matrix. Waste recovery is a very necessary thing, and waste management is a very necessary thing because we all generate waste, and as much as we would like to reduce it, the reality is the waste is there. We can reduce the amount of material we use, but we also have to consider the options. We'll take a look at this slide here. Most of the more developed areas within southeastern Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and some of the other localities where we are transmitting today, actually, you can recycle cartons now. That's one of the things that comes as a major surprise to people. But interestingly enough, cartons get made into another useful item, and that's toilet paper. If you look to the center of the screen, the center top of the screen is the sticker that we provide our residents in Newport News, which helps them with what goes in the recycling bin. So a question that I pose to the audience is, how many of your municipalities actually check their recycling? In other words, you audit your system to find out what's going in the recycling bin, because it would shock you what people think is recyclable and what it is not. We just did a recycling audit this past Wednesday, and some of the things that we found in the recycling from local residents, by the way, the community happened to be where the campus for a local university happens to be. So there's a lot of university staff and people, students that were in that group. Some of the things we found were diapers. Okay, that was kind of interesting given that community. Plastic grocery bags. Plastic grocery bags can be recycled, but at the grocery store, there's a whole reason for that. Part of which is grocery bags get caught up in the equipment. Rubber hoses, dog leashes, car parts. There is a whole host of things, and those are just a few. Oh, hair extensions, that was the other one that was kind of odd. So yard waste comes in. A lot of times people use their recycling can as the second trash can. So that becomes a problem for us, because not only do we have to pay to pick it up and process it at the cost of about $100 a ton to process, we have to pay to dispose of it again. So what seems to be an innocuous thing. Oh, I put some styrofoam or I put some plastic bags in there. It's not a big deal. This is where it comes home, is you wind up paying for it 2 or 3 times. To the right are the plastic symbols. And the interesting thing about this is everybody sees, you'll look at the top and you'll see the chasing arrows. Those are all different plastic products. Now, each one of those products, oddly enough, is recyclable in and of itself. The problem is the amount of work it takes to get them out of the system. So typically, most communities are down to number 1s and number 2s, and some will do number 5s. If you look back at the center picture, what we did in order to keep people from worrying about the numbers, we just put pictures of the items on the sticker. By the way, that sticker that we provide to our residents can stick on just about anything, including the recycling bin. The value of those plastics, by the way, compared to other recyclables, the value of plastics is very high. It's about $350 to $400 a ton compared to paper, which is actually costing us to dispose of at this time. As we look at the bottom of the screen, just a couple pictures of some of our trucks doing what they do. The third picture from the bottom on the right is actually a recycling audit like what we did on Wednesday. The fourth picture on the lower right is a picture of the equipment in a recycling plant. Most recycling plants are highly automated. However, it takes a lot of money, and the technology, the new technology that's out there to recycle more efficient is there, but a lot of these plants have not been updated in recent history. In Newport News, we also find that we have people that we do not serve directly, including people in apartments and condo complexes where they don't have recycling at their facilities. So we have additional drop-off facilities, including a big one at our Recovery Operations Center at Atkinson Way, that actually can take big pieces of cardboard. There are 2 containers in that top screen there. The one that's kind of hidden by the first one is one that can take, it's an open top container, it just takes those cardboard boxes much easier. These are pictures of the facility as it's being developed into a recreational site. Part of what we're doing is we've already got the paths are built. Because the paths had to be built for some things we're going to show a little bit later in the presentation about water management and gas management coming out of the landfill. So the paths are there. There are several miles of walking and riding paths. The bottom picture you see there is a bunch of our 3rd graders. In Newport News, we are blessed to have a magnet school, an elementary environmental magnet school at Deer Park. 2 of our grandchildren went to school there, and it's kind of exciting. Those are our 3rd graders from last year who spent about 3.5 hours on the landfill, learning and doing some science experiments and just having a good day with their teachers and their families. The access to the unit right now, because it is still in the shutdown phase. In other words, it takes quite a bit of time to shut down a landfill. We also have to keep people from walking up and down the landfill because it is still an operating facility. So we have these nice decorative fences that are surrounding most of the facility now. Those things will continue to be in use because the bottom picture actually shows our compost and mulching operation. Take a look at the stuff on the bottom picture, folks. That is stuff that would all wind up in a landfill. We are taking trees and branches and making them into mulch. We're taking leaves that would normally wind up either in a storm drain or in a landfill, and we're making those, we're grinding them up and making them into compost that is Chesapeake Bay compliant and is available to sale. Those products are available to sale for anybody who is willing to come out to our facility and buy them. We sell commercially. We sell to people throughout the peninsula, and we've actually had some congregations that were doing community gardens come out to us for product that they could use. This product also, mulch, especially the heavy mulch, helps to mitigate stormwater so that you don't have erosion problems, especially if you're in an area that's prone to erosion. Surface water resources, what you see here in the picture, you're going to see some more overhead shots of this. This lake that you see here is 20 feet deep. It's about 10 acres, and it would have been part of the landfill. Currently, it's filled with rainwater, and we are storing that rainwater. And if you see the picture in the far end of the picture, there are 5 ball fields, and we're providing water for the ball fields. One of the interesting things that will happen, but it's still part of the landfill, one of the interesting things that will happen when we turn it over is that this lake will be available for use for Parks and Rec people to come out and use it for paddle boating and canoeing and fishing. These are some of the pieces of equipment that we use. For the first lower left is our main grinder. Everything goes through this machine first and gets ground into a size that can be processed by the machine in the right center of the screen. And we collect the material in the top above the right center, which is what they call a screen. That machine actually makes 3 products at once. So it goes from the first machine into the second machine, the product comes in, as you see it, grass and leaves and just branches in the top, and the products that we turn out are on the bottom. The compost that we turn out is tested every month by Virginia Tech and Penn State. It's Chesapeake Bay compliant, which means that it doesn't add nutrients into your soil. This time of year, we have an abundance of the product. If you are looking, the master gardeners like us to remind you that at this time of year is when you want to, if you want to get your lawn clean and green, or you want to set up your planting beds and your vegetable gardens for next year, now is the time to add compost to your soil. Here's an overhead shot of the park again. You can see just how big it is. 5 ball fields. It's very popular. Our partners in Newport News are mostly familiar with this because we host a bunch of state and regional softball tournaments out of this park. The park water is coming from the lake. About 2 years ago, what we discovered was they were spending about $35,000 to $37,000 a year in potable water to water those ball fields. Well, the interesting thing is the lake on the right, we have to have a pump to pump the water out of it so it doesn't overflow into the property. All we did was run a couple of 100 feet of connecting line to their water supply, and we were able to provide water for irrigation for the park. That's not only better for the grass that I had a picture of the facility today. You'd just be amazed how beautifully green it is. Here's an overhead view which shows you just how complex managing a closed landfill is. Most of you probably may know or may not know that a landfill actually develops natural gas. This facility, the green wells, the green dots you see on the screen were actually gas wells on the landfill. We recovered gas from the landfill until last year, and that gas was used to provide heat and natural gas services to Mary Passage Middle School and to the Denby Recreation Center in Newport News. That facility is now no longer generating enough gas, which means that we're one step closer to public use of the facility. If you look around the edge of the facility, you'll see red and blue well sites, and these are to make sure they're red ones are gas wells and the blue ones are water wells. This is to make sure that nothing from the landfill, whether it's water or gas, winds up seeping into the facility or into the community and into the groundwater. The landfill, and when people come out, the one thing they're shocked about is the size of the facility because it's only used for 14 years. A landfill, when it's shut down, must be shut down for 30 years before we can provide it for public use. Okay, so we are around 2026, we should be able to transition for public use. Here's another overhead shot, which shows some conceptual plans of what we're going to use the lake for, and the rest of the property. Interesting thing here is we actually, if you look at where the lake is, you look at the star-looking thing, which is this is a winter shot, so that's why everything looks barren. But you see where the lake is, there's an area that's kind of a oddly shaped area at the bottom of that lake. That was used by the city of Newport News for years for dredge spoils, which is when we clean out a creek or a waterway to make it navigable or to take pollution out of a stormwater retention pond, it was all being dumped there. What happened was that site looked like the lunar surface. Nothing would grow. We put 12 inches of our compost on top of it, and today it looks like a meadow. As a matter of fact, the Parks and Rec Department of Newport News is grooming it currently to make it into 2 soccer fields for our youth to use. Past and the future. The interesting thing, some of the people in the group today might know a little bit about biochar. Biochar is actually creating charcoal. It's an ancient technique that was used by the Incas. And we found that if you take biochar, which we can create, you take biochar and you increase the temperature to above 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, anything you put inside the chamber will be reduced to its constituent. It'll literally disintegrate and be reduced to its constituent elements. Well, the interesting thing about this process, which by the way is very popular in Europe, is that you can generate electricity because the off gas, the synthetic gas that's created by the process, will run a gas turbine. Gas turbine, think about an electric power generating turbine that is essentially looks very similar in concept to the engine on a jet airplane. You provide it with fuel, and it will provide electricity. The other products that it creates is it creates, depending on the product you put in, you can wind up with a very nice synthetic diesel fuel. You can create oils out of it. You can also create other products that you can use in other venues. All the gases that come off of this, by the way, the products that come out of it are carbon black, which is used for carbon fiber, particularly in things like windmills and wind generation, car body parts and things like that. It also creates obsidian, which is the glass product, and it creates these really cool aggregates which can be used in construction. And I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. We have to, solid waste is a reality, ladies and gentlemen. Recycling is a reality. We can, as individuals, help to influence our communities to do better things. We can influence our congregations. If you just recycle a couple of items at church and just make it a start, you can make a difference. If each person that is listening to this and watching this program today has a sphere of about 10 people you can influence directly. And if we can do this through our congregations, we can change the world. And at the end of the day, in our case, at the end of closure, our future generations are already going to be able to enjoy what used to be a landfill and enjoy it as a park for recreational purposes. And that's all I have for now, Andrew.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. So we have a couple of questions on the chat. First one from David. Let's turn off the screen sharing. Okay, I guess you've got to turn off the screen sharing. Oh, okay.
Did I do that?
At the top, there should be a thing you can stop. So David asks, is there a way to tell if packing peanuts are made from cornstarch and are therefore compostable as opposed to ones made from styrofoam? Do we just add water to them and see if they start dissolving?
Actually, that's probably the best way to do.
Okay.
The challenge with things that are made to look like a current plastic item is that's what they're made to look like. So,
Yeah.
you know, without having a scientific method, now I will tell you this, that in the recycling plants in Northern Virginia, which we're using extensively now, they have optical sorters that can sort through these things, and they can actually, the photocell can pick out the plastic, and it will kick different plastics into different piles. So if it's an organic made plastic that is, you know, like a cornstarch plastic, it will actually kick it into a separate bin.
Okay. Corey asks, is there a way to check what land has been previously used as a landfill? If something was used as a landfill and then went through 30 years of decommissioning and it's now a park?
Absolutely. The reality is all these facilities are regulated by the EPA. And here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware also have their own departments of environmental quality, where you can punch up a piece of land. You can actually give the lat long coordinates, and they have a listing of which ones are. We cannot use the landfill, for instance, at 238 acres. We cannot turn it over for commercial use. In other words, we can't turn it over for development. It has to remain in stasis. Okay, we have, if you're familiar with Menchville, okay, Menchville is an old dump. It is still listed on the EPA's website. We cannot develop it. We can use it, Parks and Rec can use it for passive use. It's a very good question because a lot of people get confused with brownfields, which can be used for some applications for development. We've got brownfields in the, to give you another site in Newport News, where Booker T. Washington Middle School is. You familiar with that? Down the East End off of Chestnut? The school is safe. The school annexed property that was a brownfield. We had to seal the site before we could allow children to play on the soccer fields.
Yeah.
Okay. But that was, when I first came to the city, I was one of the people that discovered that. It was like orange water coming out of the soil. That's not a good thing. So yes, there are, EPA has all these sites listed, and even some of the ones that were privately owned, all of those still have to be registered. So when they're turned over or they're decommissioned, they still have to be registered. There's an amazing site in Northern Virginia that's an entire valley. It's a landfill.
Wow.
But if I were to take you on there today, you would not recognize it unless you saw the working face of the facility.
Okay. UUC Blacksburg asks, what is the experience with commercial locations and apartment buildings in terms of recycling?
It's an excellent question. It's a problem we have in Newport News too, but part of my job is to work with the property management firms and the residents and get them together on an accommodation that provides for recycling. Now in Newport News, what we did to help streamline the process is we provided 7 bulk recycling sites conveniently throughout the city, particularly where we've got large concentrations of apartments and condos. We are working with, we've actually had successful programs with Port Warwick as just one example. Another one is down at Brooks Crossing, where we got in at the ground level when they were building things so that the managers, the property managers, got on board with the program, and they found the residents wanted it. And when they find the residents want it, the cost to them, the unit cost to them is relatively low when they group it up. But then when the residents ask for something, they tend to be more conscientious about what they're throwing in the recycling bin. So we provide them with our stickers, which I think is the single greatest thing we do in Newport News is provide those stickers to make it simple.
Right. Okay. And I think this is going to be our last question for this segment. Martha asks, have you seen an issue with finding a market for recycled glass? And what do you advise in terms of purchasing products in glass containers? It comes down to the choice between something in glass and something in plastic. You said recycled plastic has a pretty good value. What about glass?
Glass has no value.
Okay.
The reality is you talk to any recycling company and they will tell you glass is the bane of their existence. When we do recycling audits, and the important is we invite the public, and we had 6 members of the public from different organizations, including one from CNU, who is an environmental studies major, and they were floored by the damage the glass provides. See, glass winds up getting in the fiber products.
Oh.
And when you process paper, it's a cold process. You're not heating the paper up. See, plastics and metals you heat up. So if the glass gets embedded, not that big a deal, it's still a problem. When glass gets into fiber, it contaminates the fiber. So when we were shipping it to China and it was having a glass content in excess of 10%, they have to separate the glass out. Glass also damages my trucks, the bins. Because think about it this way. Would you take your washing machine and take a broken glass and stick it in your washer while you're washing clothes? Probably not. When I make that analogy, people catch on, and it's like, the short answer is that recycling companies would rather recycle glass separately from the bulk recycling or the single stream recycling. We would rather see recycle it separately. And we're working on programs now to develop that.
Okay. Good. And our Barnes notes, of course, what we've heard in the news, that China has stopped accepting plastics. So we need to figure out other ways to be able to recycle the plastics we are using. And as somebody said in the last presentation, of course, reduce the amount of particularly single-use plastics as well.
Well, let me offer this to that. The southeastern U.S., we have a group called STRDC, the Southeastern Recycling Development Council. And what we have done is with that group, interestingly enough, the bottlers for Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola, and for adult beverages have come up with some concepts where they want to have 50% of the material they're using is recycled. It will come directly from the system. So if we tighten the circle and we make the manufacturing in the United States, one little FYI for your people that'll probably blow people's minds is, do you know car seats and car upholstery and carpet is often made out of recycled PET bottles? As a matter of fact, when I do presentation I did for the Sierra Club, I was wearing a shirt made out of recycled PET bottles.
Yeah.
So yes, there is an option.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. Thank you for being part of this. And yes, I do recommend to everybody that you find out how these activities are being undertaken in your local community, because as you heard from Dan's presentation, there can be quite a synergy between how materials are handled and disposed of and recycled, and various other aspects of civic activity as well. So I hope that other municipalities can do more of these sorts of things too. So we're going to finish up before lunch with a presentation from Kendall Crawford from Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. How cool is your congregation? This is a program of the National Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm really glad that Kendall's presenting this as part of our workshop today. I've known Kendall for a few years, since she was with the Virginia Sierra Club, And the last couple of years, she's been director of Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, which started off as a part of the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy and is now back with them again to provide the environmental side of working on state issues here in Virginia around the environment. So with that, I will turn it over to Kendall.
Hi, everyone. I guess I'll just give a quick wave before I turn off my camera and I share my screen. And thank you so much for all of your work on putting this together. And please let me know if some of this is repetitive for the tips for your congregation, and I can just kind of skip over those parts. Also, one last quick disclaimer. Interfaith Power and Light, we are a national organization. There's about 40 state affiliates across the country. You know, we're the Virginia affiliate. And so one of the national staff members, her name is Sarah Palos, was supposed to be giving this presentation, and she is the expert. So I'm here in her stead. So if you have any questions, I'll probably will direct you to Sarah, and I have her contact information at the end of the presentation, which of course will be shared with all of you.
Well, thank you, Kendall, and thank you for helping to publicize this too.
Oh yeah, no problem. This is an exciting event, and it's exactly the type of things we want to share. Is it up?
Yes, we can see it. We can see your screen. There we go.
Great. And you can see the PowerPoint right now?
Yes.
Oh, great. So wonderful. So again, thank you all for having me. So today we're going to be talking about how cool is your congregation. And we're not talking about how fashionable, trendy, or hip, though what we're talking about today is the hottest trend in our nation. So transitioning to clean energy is the greatest economic opportunity of this century. And of course, as we know, as people of faith, one of the greatest moral challenges of our time. So again, I am the director of Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. We're based up in Richmond, and we have 3 buckets of work: education, standing with frontline communities, resisting fossil fuel infrastructure, and of course, advocacy in the General Assembly. But today, we're talking about Cool Congregations, which is a program of national interfaith power and light. As I mentioned earlier, there's about 40 state affiliates, and they represent over 24,000 congregations across the country. And so the mission of Interfaith Power and Light is to inspire and mobilize people of faith and conscience to take bold and just action on climate change. So why is this so important? Well, we all know that climate change is real. And that's why it's important to think about greening your congregation. We know that climate is caused by burning fossil fuels, and it also impacts the most vulnerable members of our society that, of course, have done the very least to cause this problem. As people of faith and conscience, we are called to care for the earth and the poor. So we need to move to renewable sources of energy like solar and wind, and not just in our congregations, but in our homes, in our cities, in our states, to reduce the amount of carbon pollution that we produce. So what does it mean to green your congregation? It means reducing the energy your facility uses. It means reducing the amount of carbon emissions associated with energy use. And normally this means that you are trying to go all electric and sourcing the electrons from carbon-free energy sources. Again, like solar, wind, air source heat pumps, existing hydro. There are many steps along the way. Today I'll be talking about small steps that are low cost, and also some bigger ones that hopefully will inspire you to really take this on as a challenge. For example, this particular congregation here that you see on the slide is completely carbon free, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later. And of course, we know to achieve something really big and exciting like being carbon free, you'll need to create a receptive and informed attitude among your congregants and leadership so that they'll be ready to agree to make the necessary investments. And so the next part of the presentation deals with a few tips to build support in your congregation. So of course, making sure you have a strong green team. And I don't have to tell you all this because I'm sure you all know that, to make something happen in your church or your faith community, you need people. And so, of course, thinking about the people on this team, it's always great to include someone from buildings and grounds, someone from the governing board, so that they can keep the leadership informed of your actions and help garner their support. And of course, it's always great to have folks that are good at educating and talking to other folks and marketing to your wider congregation. And so one of the tasks of the Green Team is to, of course, educate your congregation. And so one easy way to do this is through movies. Movies are a great way for your congregation to learn about why it's important that they act. And normally before they're receptive to changing and willing to invest money in a lot of these initiatives, it really helps to have movies and have discussions. It's an easy way to educate your congregation. So National IPL actually offers a list of films about climate change with discussion questions. And also via IPL here in Virginia, we have our own film library. And so we send out movies and then congregations just send them back to us when they're done using it. And so of course, after your congregation is educated, your Green Team should set a goal for reducing energy use and get your congregation behind it. And one goal that hundreds of congregations have set for themselves and are already on the way to achieving is the Paris Pledge. So we all remember back in 2015 at the UN climate talks in Paris. Right now, every country in the world except for the US has signed on to this agreement. And even though the current administration has pulled out, we are the whole community of people that are working to protect creation are encouraging states, cities, local governments, businesses, and of course congregations to still take action to reduce their carbon pollution. So in support of this agreement, IPL is actually asking both congregations and individuals to commit to 50% reductions in global warming pollution by 2030. And that's towards a goal of being carbon neutral by 2050. In a few minutes, I'll show you congregations that have already achieved it and others that are working towards it. So these congregations use the tools from IPL's Cool Congregations program to reach their goals. So Cool Congregations is an Earth stewardship program to help congregations and households reduce their energy use as an act of faith. We ask everyone to make a 10% reduction to start, like a traditional tithe. So it's like a tithe to creation. Your Green Team will take your congregation through the Cool Congregation process. There's a startup kit at coolcongregations.org. And this kit actually has suggestions for organizing, finding ideas, celebrating, sharing your success. The startup kit, so that's how you start the basic Cool Congregations process. And in the startup kit, it has some super helpful resources like 25 steps to reducing energy. That's actually the most popular resource from the Cool Congregations program. And of course, before you start reducing, you'll need to have a benchmark, a snapshot of your energy use so that you'll have something to compare to later so you can see how amazing your faith community has been doing at reducing your energy use. And of course, it's important to have this comparison info to convince your congregation to continue investing in measures to reduce. And so this is, there's lots of ways to get this benchmark. IPL actually has a calculator for congregations and households on the website. It measures energy use, transportation, goods and services, and also waste. And it's very exciting that some new calculators are coming out and going to be added to this later on this year. So another one of the first steps is getting an energy audit. Sometimes they're free depending on offerings in your area. And of course, they sometimes are required, especially if you want to take advantage of energy efficiency rebates and incentives. The audit will likely check the airflow, quality of installation, lighting, etc. And if they don't check the functioning of your HVAC system, you may need to hire an HVAC consultant to come in and give you that data. Some larger churches and faith communities, we've seen hire an engineering firm to do a more extensive audit. This is normally a good investment because if you take any of their recommended actions, you earn the investment back quickly through energy savings. And of course, this photo is just taken with a thermal imaging camera. And the blue color shows the cold air coming in from under the door. This is an easy and inexpensive fix with weatherization, and definitely helps with energy costs. So the next important step is, of course, to make a plan. So this will be a long-term project, and so you'll want to make a plan by looking at the auditor's suggestions, looking at the IPL 25 steps, both under $25 and over $25, looking at some other success stories to get some ideas, and also looking at the EPA Energy Star for Congregations workbook, which is a very valuable resource. Cool. So this is an example of Blessed Sacrament, a small church in West Virginia, and they cut their lighting energy use by 82%. And so, one of the easiest things that you can start with for the biggest bang for your buck is, of course, lighting, LEDs. But I'm sure you all talked about that earlier, so I won't get into that too much. So there's a 25 steps under $25 resource on the IPL website. And this resource has 2 tip sheets, one for under $25 and the other for over $25. And you can download both of them, for free on the IPL website. The website's at the bottom of the slide here. And so as you can see, there's lots of different sections for the 25 steps under $25. And so there's lighting, it just reminds folks to turn off the lights when not in use, opening the curtains, upgrading to LED lighting, installing LED exit signs. And of course, if you use holiday lights in your congregation, you can use the new LED lights. It's really cool because they're coming in warm white and lots of colors and shapes, and actually use 85% less electricity. You can also recycle the old strings as they contain valuable reusable copper. So thinking about your kitchen and appliances and gadgets, you can set the dishwasher on air dry. You can unplug and recycle old refrigerators and freezers when they're not in use. You can also unplug your coffee maker when you're not using it during the weekend. Anything that creates heat usually draws a whole lot of electricity. And of course, you can think about air drying your laundry. Perhaps drying the kitchen towels on a rack. So when you're thinking about changes that can be made in the office or in meeting rooms, of course, you can set your computers on energy saving mode. You can actually save as much as 75% if you put your computer into a power saving mode when you won't be using it for an extended period of time, and enable power management features during shorter periods of inactivity. And of course, we all know you can turn it off at night or days when you know it won't be used. And another quick and easy thing to do is to use power strips. You can plug in office equipment and turn them off to prevent phantom load. And it's actually quite astounding because 6 to 12% of the nation's electricity actually goes to keeping things in standby mode, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. So thinking about HVAC and your heating and cooling, you can avoid overheating and overcooling the building. Of course, you can caulk and weatherize, and you can make sure that you're replacing your filters regularly. to make sure that you're keeping the air flowing. And thinking about water, make sure that your tank is set at 120 degrees. 120 degrees is actually the required temperature for dishwashers. You can make sure that you're washing your linens in cold water and using faucet aerators and insulating your hot water pipes. And of course, for transportation, some ideas there. Make sure you're encouraging your congregants to ride bikes or carpool, take public transit, or even walk to get to worship services. And if you have, faith community van, you can always make sure that you are checking the tire pressure and replacing, air filters there on the vehicles. So another quicker and easier thing to do is thinking about reducing, reusing, and recycling, as we were just talking about. Making sure that you're reducing the use of disposables for food service, and also making sure that you are improving or beginning your recycling and starting a compost pile. These measures are all super simple and cost under $25. Now, if you want to start kind of thinking a little bit more longer, bigger items, things that cost over $25 and maybe a little bit more ambitious. So remember that there is one resource that has under $25 steps, and then another resource that has steps over $25. And so a few of the steps from the handout costing over $25, when it's time to upgrade, choose Electric Energy Star certified appliances and equipment. Make sure that you're insulating the building walls and ceilings. And you can save up to 25% of energy use from that. Thinking about planting trees for shade to the south and west to cool the building in the summer, and pine trees to the north to block cold winter winds. And of course, you can also think about replacing windows and with the most energy efficient ones. And heat pumps are another great way to get a good payback. And it's possible to reduce even more. It takes more work, but the payoff can be well worth it. So thinking about heat pumps, for example, once you have reduced your energy use as much as possible, air source heat pumps can be used to heat and cool your building. You can also choose to heat your water with heat pumps. Heat pumps extract heat from the air to or from the building, and they cut energy costs by 30 to 60%. So as you're thinking about some of these larger investments, this is a really great website for state incentives for renewables and energy efficiency. So I would definitely recommend you all to jot this down or to revisit the PowerPoint later, so you can grab this site. You just enter in your zip code and it has tons of rebates and options available to you. So if your utility isn't offering 100% of their electricity from renewable sources anytime soon, and unfortunately Dominion and APCO definitely are not, and I haven't heard of any co-ops here in Virginia that are, then you should consider adding solar to your congregational facility. Many congregations are already doing it, and this is a picture of Immaculate Conception's Catholic Church solar panels that they've been recently installed in Hampton, Virginia. And actually, VIPL also has some resources on our website, thinking about, like, if you're going through the process discerning if solar is right for your congregation. And we also have some, partners that we can hook you up with if you're interested in thinking more about solar here in Virginia. So as you reach the milestones on the way to being 100% renewable, you should apply for a Cool Congregation certification. It's absolutely free. This is an easy way to show your congregation that you are making progress. which is an important way to keep their interest and support for continued investments. So 4 levels of certification are available for 10%, 20%, 30%, and 40% reductions. You can get a paper certificate suitable for framing. Most importantly, you get bragging rights. You also are listed on the National IPL website, and you can purchase a lovely eco-friendly bamboo plaque for display in your congregation to remind everyone of your accomplishments. And of course, all of this is available at the Cool Congregations website that you see listed there. And so thinking about some of the examples from across the nation, this is the St. John Newman Catholic community up in Reston, Virginia. They're a certified Cool Congregation with a 30% carbon reduction. Basically, at this church, they were impressed. IPL was impressed by the effect of several energy saving measures, which had been implemented by the facility manager. So they ended up doing an energy audit, which identified several opportunities for them to reduce their energy consumption. And so they implemented some of those measures, and they actually reduced their electricity use by 28%. They reduced their greenhouse gas emissions by 29%, and they reduced their annual fuel costs by about $15,000. So the capital costs for these energy efficiency measures were recouped by energy savings within 4 years. And so the team there applied for the Cool Congregations Award to showcase to the congregation the effects of a few practices, such as switching to LED bulbs and adjusting the air handling components. And so their hope is to really stimulate parish learning about energy efficiency measures in both the parish and actually at home too. And so this certification will also be another way to publicize and promote the stewardship efforts that are part of Catholic social teaching for them. So that's just one example. And then once a congregation has reduced their energy use, IPL encourages them to compete in the Cool Congregations Challenge. And so the Cool Congregations Challenge is an annual national contest to recognize cool congregations that are becoming energy efficient and sustainable role models within their communities. There are 5 categories with prize money of $1,000 for each one. And so 2018 winners are, for the Energy Saver category, the Blessed Sacrament Church in South Charleston. And they won by switching their lighting to LEDs, cutting lighting energy use by actually 82%. In the Renewable Role Models category, Unitarian Universalist Society in Iowa won that for building the greenest church in Iowa with geothermal solar for energy, for electricity. And so actually this, since they're all electric, they are net zero, providing all of their own electricity from renewable energy sources. And actually a group of committed church members formed an LLC to fund the solar array. And the LLC sells the electricity produced by the array to the church at a rate lower than the power company. So they are just a shining example. And with cherry on top, they also have 4 electric cars charging stations. So in the Cool Planner category, so this past year, Lidbrook Community Ministries in New Mexico won for their solar outreach efforts. They actually are doing a really cool program. Their project is designed to bring solar power to the people in the surrounding communities, where there are several elderly and single parent families living without electricity. So that's no electricity at all. The initial phase is to bring solar powered refrigeration to 10 homes. And the second phase is to put complete solar on 3 homes by the end of this year. They're teaching community members as volunteers to install these solar units. In the Sacred Grounds category, Binkley Baptist Church in North Carolina won for their waste reductions actions. They now prevent more than 1 ton of waste entering the landfill every month by composting and no longer using disposables for serving food. In the community inspiration category, First Parish Unitarian Universalist won in Massachusetts for their anti-idling educational campaign to reduce wasted fuel and boost community health. And so, if you think that your congregation is ready to compete and participate in the Cool Congregations Challenge, the deadline for entry is mid-December, and winners are announced by the end of February the next year. And again, there is no fee to enter either of these programs, the Cool Congregations program or the Cool Congregations Challenge. So that brings us to basically the end of my presentation. But before I completely finish, I just wanted to put in a quick plug for something that Virginia IPL is doing this fall. I want to encourage all of you to take word of Climate in the Pulpits back to your faith community. We are encouraging congregations all across the state to lift up a discussion around climate change and climate disruption this fall from November 15th through the 17th. So whether it's incorporating it through the weekly service or a film screening or a community discussion or community outing, it's up to your faith community, whatever works for you. And of course, if the dates aren't great, you can feel free to adjust the dates as needed. But the important thing is that we're talking about really the faith community's role in lifting up faithful and just solutions to the climate crisis. And so this year is the first year that we're bringing Climate in the Pulpits to Virginia, and we're really hoping to have a lot of communities participate from across the state. And our theme for this year is environmental justice. So I hope that you will participate and sign up your congregation. And you can sign up and also find out more on the VA IPL website, which is at the bottom, vaipl.org/climate in the pulpits. So I encourage you to participate there. And then very last thing, the contact information. So on the left-hand side, sorry, this is a little bit of a busy slide. On the left-hand side is the National Interfaith Power and Light website. Again, Sarah Paulos was supposed to do this presentation. She has all of the answers to questions. So if you have questions, please contact her. And then my information's on the right. I am with the Virginia affiliate. Thanks.
Thank you, Kendall. And Kendall's presentation is in the shared Google Drive folder that I will send out probably tomorrow once the Zoom recording has finished processing. Let's see, we had a comment that came in from John talking about what Newport News Public Schools is doing. I believe Newport News Public Schools is now the biggest school district, or at least bigger than Richmond, and it is offering breakfasts and lunches for all students for free. And 2 years ago, they added heat pumps, or you're talking about Williamsburg. 2 years ago, I added a heat pump to support an oil-fired furnace and reduced fossil fuel consumption by 84%. So yes, heat pumps can be incredibly efficient. And I don't know in this part of Virginia if there are many options for geothermal, given that the water table is only a few inches underneath us, but certainly many places can do that. Any further comments or questions until we break for lunch, before we break for lunch?
Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kendall. Okay, could you turn off your screen sharing?
If I can figure out how. How do I stop this?
Somewhere on the Zoom window, there should be a stop button.
Can I speak?
No.
Go ahead, Seth.
A couple of things. I just wanted to add that solar water heaters are a cost-effective way to address solar power in a cost-effective way.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go all out for solar panels. So if the congregation wants to go solar water heater is a good way to start.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to mention Arcadia Wind Power. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they, for a $5 monthly amount, you can tap into their wind generator program. And I don't know how this works, but somehow they feed into the same system that the AEP and the coal industry feeds into in the electrical grid.
Mm.
And so for $5, you pay into the wind generating system so that, for example, if you rent and you can't get a solar panel because you're renting your apartment,
Yeah.
you actually pay this $5 a month fee to feed into the wind generating system. I don't know how it works, and I don't know how legitimate it is.
Yeah.
But it's something to consider, and it's called the Arcadia Wind Power.
Yeah, I think I've heard a little bit about that, and it seems like it is legitimate from what I've heard.
Yeah.
Like, of course, one of the things that we're working towards in the General Assembly are, solutions that would actually bring renewable energy to, our state here in Virginia instead of, other states' wind. And so I know if folks are interested, I'd definitely be willing to talk maybe at another time about some of the options for doing that. There have definitely been more talks around Virginia's renewable portfolio standard, which is basically our goal for renewable energy actually here within the state, here in Virginia. And so I know a lot of the other organizations are thinking about trying to change our voluntary goal for renewable energy into a mandatory goal through the General Assembly. Yeah.
Okay.
So I got one more comment.
Sure. Go ahead.
There was an excellent comment on the ways to address reducing the energy footprint. But I wanted to add that above all, reducing the amount of consumption, generally speaking, is the best way to reduce the footprint. And it also reduces the amount of humanitarian destruction in the developing world, because the products that we get from China and Bangladesh and India, etc., come from conditions where people are working in sweatshop conditions. And so the less that we consume not only reduces the amount of CO2 emissions in the process of construction and the amount that we are damaging when we use these things in this country, but it also reduces the amount of sweatshop labor in the developing world. So reducing the amount of consumption generally is to be the rule of thumb, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Seth. A couple of other comments before we break. Peter writes that Westminster Presbyterian Church has Arcadia for their power other than what's provided by their own solar panels. Corey says she uses community solar in Prince George's County, which is based on a credit system rather than giving power directly. So the solar panels are somewhere else. And John says that he's glad that Virginia Interfaith Power and Light is merged back into the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. And Kendall and Faith Harris bring power and light to the vision and mission of the Virginia Interfaith Center. Okay, thank you all. So while we break for lunch or whatever break makes sense in your particular time zone, I have some questions for discussion amongst your group or individual reflection. Based on the presentations that we've had this morning, what role does your faith play in becoming more green? At least a couple of our presenters talked about the faith resources. Every faith has something to say about responsible stewardship or participating in the web of life. So what does your faith specifically say, and how does it help you? What have you already done individually or in your faith community to become more green? What are the quick wins, as Corey put it, that you could pursue next? Which items on those 25 actions under $25 could you undertake? Looking at living the change, what could you do to reduce energy use, travel more sustainably, and eat lower on the food chain? Some of those things might be quick wins, some of them might not. What do you know about how your trash and recycling is handled in your municipality, at your faith community? What partnerships can you develop to become more green together? Whether it is a green team, a supper group, collaborations with other groups in your community. We can't do this by ourselves. We need to do it in partnership. And what support do you need, either individually or as a community, to continue moving forward to become more green? So I'm going to pause the recording now, and we will resume at 1 p.m. Eastern time, whatever that works out to be in your time zone. So you can either blank your video or log out. You can always come back in again, but we will resume at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So see you all in about 50 minutes. The recording. Okay, so this afternoon, before we finish up between 2 and 2:30, we have 2 more presentations by Green Faith Fellows from my class this year. The first is David Takahashi talking about starting where you are, lessons learned adopting a sustainable lifestyle. Let me read you David's bio. David works for the generations to come. He practices the triple bottom line of caring for the earth, for the people, and sharing any surplus. He has experienced substantial personal loss due to climate change. He and his wife Emily rechanneled that loss into a demonstration of making a 60-year-old home carbon positive. He's using that personal experience to help green houses of worship. Okay, David, over to you.
First of all,
Okay,
I want to thank everyone.
David, you were muted, so.
Oh. Yeah, first of all, I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy lives and showing up. It's really important. So I'm going to go ahead and launch right in here. Okay, let's see what is going on. Okay, so some ground rules, 10 minutes presentation, 20 minutes of Q&A. Try to get to as many questions as we can. I am making this presentation available on Andrew's Google Drive. The questions in the chat box as we go, we'll take them in the order received. And if you have a pressing issue, then raise your hand and Andrew will try to cope. Okay, so we start with a simple question. What use is a house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? a lot of our work that you're going to be seeing revolves around this simple question. So without greenhouse gas, we would basically be a frozen ball. And with greenhouse gases, with the systems that are in play, our environment averages around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is optimal for a lot of the life that we know. However, if that balance gets imbalanced, heating starts to occur. So we are exceeding the equilibrium right now. So how do we know? Well, we know that the Earth can process about 20 gigatons of carbon dioxide. That's what keeps it at about 70 degrees. If we take the 7 billion people that are populating the Earth and we divide that in, then we figure out that about 3 tons per person per year is that carrying capacity. And if we are under it, it will start to cool, and if we're over it, it's going to start to heat up. So what is a ton? A ton looks about like the size of a modest home. Okay. And how is this being used? Well, some countries are using more than others. And again, it's important to recognize that this is per capita, what we're talking about, which lies a little bit, which we'll get into a little bit later. But we do know that there are some countries that are using much, much, much more than that 3 ton. Whoops. And our role is to tread lightly, to be conscious of our footprint. And there are some simple things. We won't go into these. There are some simple things we can do, but these simple things are not going to get us back to equilibrium. They're important to do. They may not get us back to equilibrium. So what do we start with? We start with how big is our carbon footprint? And Corey did such a great job of talking you through this. When doing your footprint, it's important to also look, I mean, you're looking at your home energy, you're looking at some of the things you don't normally think about, like transport, how you get to and from, and secondary things like where your food's coming from, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, there's air travel in there, which kind of got into in the living the change idea, right? Transportation, food, and energy. Okay, so our goal here is to create some abundance. We don't need to sacrifice and live within planetary limitations, that 3 ton. So how do you live a modern good life and be within that 3 ton limit that we know exists? And if we do this, we will ensure that our children and their children and their children have a shot at a good life. So I have to confess, I suffer from OCD. It is obsessive carbon disorder. So we're going to get into what is going on with where you begin, and we begin with energy efficiency. We start with conserving energy, reducing what we're using and conserving that energy as long as we can. So we're going to start with a 1954 home. We wanted to do this on a existing home because most of the housing stock in the world already exists and not everyone can afford to start anew. This is our home, that 1954 home this year. And this is how it looked before we started. And this is how it looked after. The changes you see, the changes you cannot see, basically. So if we're going to be moving off of natural gas or fossil fuels, one of our options is to electrify. And on a home built in 1954, the electrification did not foresee things like dishwashers and microwaves and electrified heat and blah, blah, blah. So the first thing we did was we upgraded our service. Then we got an energy audit, and the energy audit includes this thing called the blower door test, which basically checks to see if there are leaks, where they are coming from. The energy audit also goes through your appliances and tells you which ones are ready to be replaced, which ones don't need to be replaced, they're already Energy Star, where the low-hanging fruit is in terms of your energy consumption. We were lucky. The house was a replacement house for a house that burned down in a wildfire, and most of the appliances had been changed to Energy Star. So what we did was we found an advisor, and for you, I may be your advisor, but it's important to find an advisor because you have all these moving pieces that can be overwhelming. So you start with the lowest hanging fruit, and for us, that was insulation and ceiling. Here is where typically you're going to be losing energy. What we did was we went ahead and got an infrared camera, which actually where it is blue is cold, and where it is blue it is cold, and where it is orange it is warm. So we're seeing heat leaking out of the windows. We're also seeing that the house itself could use some insulation. We went ahead and we have a crawl space. We went ahead and sealed and insulated it. We have a whole house fan. It was a source that they fall back down and prevent air coming in or out. We looked into air source heat pumps. We wanted to get off of fossil fuel, and we were lucky our furnace was at its effective lifetime, so we knew that we were going to have to replace it anyway. The way air source heat pumps work is very much like your refrigerator. Refrigerator takes room temperature air and makes it cold or makes it freezing. So it's a 60-year-old home. We had a forced air furnace. We decided let's use the embodied energy of all the ductwork that had existed, and we put in an air handler. In order to get this thing down into our crawl space, we had to increase the size of the hole that was the entry point for the crawl space. You know, it's just like stuff happens. And we had an underserved area where we put in a mini split. So when you're doing air source heat pumps, you can do ducted, or you can do these mini splits. And the notable thing about the mini splits is the louvers you see down there on the bottom are behind. There is this electronic eye that is using kind of that infrared technology to scan the room and see where it needs to push air. So if there's a cold spot and you need warmth, it directs air there. So it's just a wonderful thing. My wife loves it. This is in a piano studio, and my wife, she didn't want anything noisy, and this is whisper quiet. The thing about air source heat pumps or geo source heat pumps is that you get both heating and cooling. Unlike the refrigerator where you only get the cooling, this you get both. And incredibly efficient, as people have already mentioned. We also, it was a 60-year-old home. We went through, we replaced the windows. We replaced them with, we found we could lower our requirement for how fancy the window was and get triple pane at a cheaper price than replacing the windows that were, the single pane windows that were in there that were double hung. We essentially replaced with triple pane single hung, meaning there's only one pane that's actually moving up and down, and that just works fine for us. The final thing was to move the hot water, and we found an air source heat pump which works without having to have its own room. Many of them require a 10 by 10 room to sit in because of the air, what happens with the cold and the hot. In order to make hot water, you end up with cold air. That's how heat exchange works. So that was a challenge. We saw through that. And one day we had the utility come out and remove their gas line. So we are a fossil fuel-free zone. And that was our intention. And we are a fossil fuel-free zone, and this is a what we call a charbecue. It actually uses wood pellets to cook your food, and it creates biochar as a byproduct. So we are not using propane. We are not using natural gas. We waved goodbye. So I'm not going to go into the details here, but we pretty much doubled the efficiency of our home. There's this thing called a HERS rating. HERS, it's like the mile per gallon on an automobile. It allows you to compare efficiencies between buildings. This is, again, you're going to get the deck. I'm not going to go into it. But I can tell you that we started at 193. 100 is a new home built to code. We were twice as bad, if you will, as a new home built to code. And through our work, we're down to minus 50, which means we are net positive. We've blown through net zero and we are net positive. So this is some of the stuff that goes into the HERS rating. It's lighting, it's insulation, it's windows, it's blah, blah, blah. And again, you're going to get this. So I'm not going to go into the detail. And if you have questions, post them. So having gone through and done the conservation and consumption and all that, now we looked at production. And what we wanted is a nanogrid. And a nanogrid is basically solar or production, storage and load or usage, and then a connection to the outside world or the grid. So in our home, we have the solar panels on the roof, we have batteries in the crawl space, and we have load, and we have grid. So in this situation right here, we have energy coming in. the batteries are full, power goes to the inverter. The inverter says, do I need to change this to energy that the grid understands? And it does that and sent out some to the grid and then sent some to our home's load. So during the life of our carbon here is at night, we generally start consuming off the battery. So the battery charge is going down. And then in the morning, the sun comes up and we start charging the battery. And when the battery gets fully charged, we start exporting to the grid and selling. So right in here, we're not buying, we're using the battery. And here we are buying because we're charging. And then here we're selling. So another way to look at this is from the battery's perspective. The blue here is what is happening with the battery. So overnight it's depleting, and then the sun comes up and it starts charging. And then when it's fully charged and there's no load, then we're selling. And the yellow here is production. Whoops. And blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this is our solar array up on the roof. And there was a question earlier about what do you do with trees? And this is a 60-year-old subdivision, and we do have mature trees, a lot of mature trees. So the way we got around this is we have optimized every panel so that if a panel is getting sunlight, it will be producing energy. So when it snows, the snow's going to fall down. These panels will be exposed earlier than these and earlier than those, and they'll start producing, and then these will start, and then, you know, we basically maximize the amount of sunlight we're harvesting. Again, I mentioned the batteries. This is 32 kW of battery. That's basically 3 or 4 days of usage. So if we don't have the Maria syndrome here, when the grid goes down, we will be operating off of our batteries for 3 or 4 days. And since we had the solar installed last September, since then we have created about 7 megawatt of solar. 4 of that has gone to the grid, and we have consumed some from the grid. That is like it snowed, the snow is stuck, the sun isn't shining, you got to go to the grid. We went ahead and calculated our footprint after all of this work, and we came up with 4 metric tons of carbon. And if you do the math, there's 2 of us here in the house. We do this per capita deal. So you take the 4 divided by 2, and we're at 2 ton per person, and that is indeed under the 3. So what are our next steps? Andrew mentioned that having done our house, now we're looking at doing houses of worship, and we encourage you to do the same. And that's it for me.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing now.
Okay. So we have a few minutes for any questions for David about his presentation. Are you currently working with any congregations to help them through this process?
Definitely. I'm always working with congregations. They're in varying stages of doing the work, of course, with congregations being very resource constrained, it is a real challenge. But the angle I am working on currently is this, that there are, most churches have more parking than they have church. And what I am trying to do is make it possible for churches to put solar on their parking lots and use that energy for themselves and to sell it as a revenue stream for the church.
Yeah.
And what gets in the way is this thing called investor-owned utilities. And so I'm having to deal with public utility commissions and state legislators and, you know, the whole, but this is going to be the future. The future is going to be, and basically at some point we know that there aren't even going to be cars under there, right? Because we're, you know, eventually we're going to go to some new way of getting around, and we have to.
Yeah.
But until then, there's to get around the resource constraints. This is the way I think. Okay, so I'm after the state legislators. I'm after the PUC. I'm looking at people that have already done this. We have a. It's really ironic here in Colorado. We have this thing called legalized marijuana. And what legalized marijuana is an opportunity for people to grow it. And it turns out that when you grow marijuana, you use an incredible amount of energy. So there's a studio in town that has like a parking lot like a church would have. Think of it like this is a church surrounded by a parking lot. And they put in a they covered their parking, and it's 1.3 megawatt. I mean, it's a mass. Yeah, it's massive. And I'm like, how did you do this?
Yeah.
How? And he said, well, I have a tenant. Okay, so I can't be asking churches to put a tenant in their basement, right?
Yeah.
So I have to do something else, and that's my plan. So that's what I'm doing with, but I'm also helping them figure out the steps that they need to take, as I have done in the presentation.
Okay.
But the big picture is to get them some revenue.
Let's combine a couple of questions from the chat, and then Mara has her hand up, so we'll go to her afterwards. A couple of questions were basically about the cost of all the improvements you made and the payback period.
Right. Okay. So the cost was, as Corey said, this is, it is important if you are talking about environment to have walked the walk. So first thing is, I am able to say when oil and gas says you're just a bunch of hypocrites and you're talking about restricting the use of this, but you're using it yourself. I get to say, no, that's not right. So there's that. Second, there is a cost of doing nothing, which we know about. How, so let's talk about that cost. We're living in this world where we have this incredibly cheap subsidized energy. How the heck did that happen?
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's the cost savings that I'm not paying for electricity anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
There's the fact that the grid goes down and my lights are on. Okay. But really what I was trying to do is put a line in the sand that said, look, you can take an old home and you can turn it net positive, and you can get the heck off of fossil fuel.
Yeah.
And you can no longer say, but it's never been done. Okay, so there's that. And then there's the fact that the improvements that we have made on this house, though they don't have true value, but I'm working on the true value part, they have anecdotal value. So somebody is going someday to buy this house, and they're going to perhaps appreciate the fact that they can be off grid.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's the other thing of the cost of my improvements are far less than the appreciation on the property just due to natural supply and demand.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope that that's an answer to the question.
Let's get Mara's question, and then
Okay.
David, there's a couple of technical questions in the box. Maybe you can
Sure.
answer those. But Mara, what's your question?
My question, let me just state, I'm in a home, 1960 is when it was built, 1,300 square foot. I've restuccoed, I've painted the windows, I've insulated wall, ceiling, crawl space, re-roofed. What I'm looking at is possible solar, and also the water tank came up during this discussion with you in this workshop. So I need to know, how do you know which of the solar companies, because there's so many of them out there knocking on our doors.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something I would want to do at the age of 83 to invest? Trees, I don't need worry about. I have one Chinese pistache out front, but the trees will not obstruct anything here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I'm situated.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Albuquerque, you get sun up the, yeah. So, okay, so it's important to ask yourself what you want out of your solar system. So what a lot of people do is they do what is called a PPA, a power purchase agreement, and they basically don't own the solar. So if you want to, you could get somebody to install solar on your roof, but that they own it, but you don't maintain it. What you
David, we lost your sound. I think he's having an internet connection issue.
It could be having an internet connection.
Yeah. Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, so in a PPA, you don't own it, but somebody else does, but you get in at no down and you get a 20-year deal on energy. That was not what we wanted to do. What we wanted to do is own our power system. So if you want to let somebody else own your system, then it's a no-brainer, right? It doesn't matter who you go with. They're going to own it. They're going to maintain it. If you want to own it, then you start talking to people, and a lot of them will say, "Oh, we don't do self-owned. You know, we install and own." So it kind of selects who you can talk to.
Great. That helps a great deal,
Yeah,
David.
and then the hot water, that one's a challenge. So
Yeah.
we should connect through Andrew, and we can talk about that.
Okay.
Can I jump
Thank
in?
you very much. That's helped already.
Can I say something?
Sure. We'll take one more question, then we need to move on.
Okay. I have a website for poverty relief that includes
2 sellers of solar panels that are really good outlets for solar panels. And I can share that website with the group if you like.
Sure, yes, please.
Okay, so if everybody will get a pencil.
Can you type it into the chat box?
Oh, I surely can. Duh. Okay, let me get my dog off again. And I'm done.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, David, for that. That's a really good way of seeing what is possible, what can be done. And as I say, we did have a few more questions in the chat box. David, if you could have a look at those, and I'd be happy to put people in touch with David as well after the workshop. So we're moving on to our last presentation of the day. And this is from another Green Faith Fellow in my cohort, Kelly Longfellow, on the subject of preparing and implementing a green sanctuary plan, the good, the bad, and the green. And Kelly's presentation, like David's and the others, is in the shared folder that I will be sending out once all that information is ready to go. And let me find Kelly's bio to share with you. She is a PhD candidate at Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Her thesis has gone from faith-based organizations and their framework towards sustainable societies to evaluating facilities maintenance, a case study of the results of implementing sustainability practices. She is a sustainability program specialist for General Services Administration in the federal government, responsible for evaluating and implementing energy and water conservation, solid waste management, and bio-preferred purchasing in federal facilities. And she will explain what all of that means to us. So Kelly, over to you.
Happy afternoon. So what a wonderful day it is. And I changed my perspective. So I'm outside my parents' patio, enjoying nature and the trees and the humidity here in Oklahoma. Can't you see the curly hair? So therefore, it's between March and October. It's a really wonderful hair day. So therefore, I need to figure out how to share my screen. Angie, please remind me. Is there a spot where I just share?
Share on the bottom.
Kelly, you're muted. Kelly, we can't hear you.
Unmute myself.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. But for some reason, when I do my next arrow, it's not allowing me to go to the next screen.
Huh.
Unless I do a return.
Or space.
Or a space. I'm doing the exit to get out of sharing. Can you, on your end, stop sharing for me, or when I press return, the space bar, then arrow keys?
Let's see. Yeah, I can share and then share.
Okay.
Okay, you're out of sharing now.
I'm out of sharing. Let me go back to sharing. and go to play. So therefore, the solution to pollution is not dilution. So today's agenda, what I'm looking at is I'm looking at your green sanctuary process. And I was like, how can I define and look forward into this to educate? And I identified that there's two sections, the congressional assessment, and of course, creating an action plan. And then how do you maintain your certification? That's what we're gonna look at this afternoon. So therefore, in your process, I was looking at to become a green sanctuary, the congressional assessment, where you look at your energy and water usage and your green purchasing and your food and your waste management, and then create an action plan to continue the movement forward on being sustainable and eco-friendly. So therefore, we're going to look at today the energy, water, solid waste, purchasing, food choices, and other. We've had a lot of good talks today already about energy consumption, but want to kind of highlight a little bit here is the energy pyramid. At the end of the day is changing your daily habits. Like for example, I'm here at my parents' house for the weekend and I unplugged everything before I left Texas. I unplugged my hot water tank, my washer and dryer, my TV and internet, and everything else. So because I'm not there, I'm not using it. So therefore, in a big congregation, a facility like yourselves, to monitor where your energy's usage is at, I'm going to suggest to sub-meter. Like at my church, we had a school, and we're 3 stories in a sanctuary. So if we sub-meter, we can see where the energy usage is at, and we can charge our school appropriately, not by square footage, but also by usage. And of course, you've heard about the energy audits, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, and of course, providing the correct energy provider. I use it, I'm paying, I think, 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which is not 2 cents or 3 cents more than my friends are paying, but as I talked about earlier is the ethics. I'm choosing wind energy versus other energy. So once again, all that perspective. Then once you made those personal decisions, then you buy the energy star and so forth in the lead, and then you go renewable. On the renewable, I actually put down the deposit to have the Tesla solar shingles on my house. I don't know when they're coming to Texas, but I have, my mark on their map that I'm ready whenever they're ready to come. So what I like to do is actually go to some of these web pages, and I know we have time permitting, but sometimes you can do your own energy audit internally. So like right here, we're gonna have all these web pages for you to go to, is looking at Energy Star. Now, Energy Star is beyond the appliances that you purchase. You can actually go to energy.gov and go to their wonderful web page and how to actually do your own energy audit at your home. They have checklists. They provide you how to weatherize and how to save energy and fuel and so forth. So what a great resource to go to that the government does support and have for anyone to use. I also want to highlight a web page that my agency, we own and operate, and it's free to anyone in the world. And what's amazing to me is that the number 2 hits globally is India and Germany. Amazing enough that those 2 countries are actually reviewing this web page to see how to stay sustainable. So this web page is called Sustainable Facility Tool. And if you kind of go over here to explore, you have all kinds of systems that are in facilities: HVAC, indoor air quality, lighting, your planted roof and solid waste and so forth. So if you actually look at the HVAC system.
Kelly, we're seeing your PowerPoint, we're not seeing your web browser.
Oh, because I changed my perspective on my viewing. Got it. A new share. Thank you. Okay.
There we go.
There we go. So once again, this is Sustainable Facility Tool, the webpage my agency monitors. If you go to Explore, you see the building systems, HVAC, air quality, and so forth, like I said a minute ago. Let's just click on HVAC systems because we're looking at energy. I know we have time to look at. So if you look at a facility, you have the roof, the walls, the fans, the cooling towers, and so forth. And when you click on each one, let's say the internal heat load, right? Let's click on the green dot. This populates and you look at more of the heat loads going on in the building and more of an explanation. And you can click on any one of them and it goes through there. The mechanical room. I know my church has a mechanical room. So therefore, understanding more about heat pumps, the chillers, the boilers, and the controls if you have a BAS system in your facility. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Share. You can look at the other facilities as you go forward, but as you know, Energy Star, you can go and actually register your church and the Energy Star and share your utility usage and your water usage, and you will get an Energy Star rating for your facility, a school, your faith facility as well. So you kind of monitor that and see how you're doing compared to other buildings and your same size. Next, let's move on to water. What's amazing enough that we have 97% of our water is in our oceans, correct? And only 3% is our fresh water. And some of that is in our ice caps and glaciers, which is currently melting, and other. But what's amazing enough, that little drop is that surface water that we use, that 0.3%. Now that 0.3%, 87% of it is the lakes and swamps and rivers. That's the water we use for air conditioning, to turn on our lights, to drink, manufacturing. That's the water we use for our daily life, is that 0.3%. Just imagine that influence on the water we use and abuse. So I wanted to show you some other things. Well, I've already showed you SF tool, but you can go there again later and look at the water module and see about water conservation and water usage and stuff like that. But I want to kind of keep the topic going and go to the EPA, and I'll new share. Here's the EPA Water Sense webpage. And here you have a wonderful resource on right here, Water Sense labeled homes. Home specifications and buying and selling homes based on water usage. Of course, the water tool and tool resources. And then for facilities like our commercial, look at your water score. That's what we talked about earlier in our footprint score and everything. Here's a water score. And of course, best management practices and webinars. This is a great resource for graphics. So when you do your education for your congregation, just come here and download every week a new graphic to discuss about the water usage and saving and using. Like one right here, we said, did you know since 2006, we have used 3.4 trillion gallons of water in your usage. Wonderful resources. Now let's talk about waste management. This is my forte. I am the Oscar the Grouch right here. So if you look at our waste management, there's a wonderful graph that I got like almost 10 years ago, but it still is true today. Out of right here, which ones can we really own up to and decrease? We can decrease our garden usage, our waste, our kitchen waste right off the bat. And of course, our paper, and then our textiles. Those are the ones we can actually do right now at more of a zero cost, right? Kitchen waste, cook less, sharing, donation, things like that. So we're talking about, here's a solid waste audit. This is what I do at my job. I do audits in our buildings that get solid waste. On the right-hand side, most of us at our congregations, we have dumpsters. Have you really done a waste audit and figured out your dumpster size, the correct hauling schedule of your dumpster, and of course, your diversion rates? So on the right-hand side is a simple spreadsheet. You have your container, say it's an 8-yard or 4-yard container. When it's hauled off, is it hauled off every day, once a week? When it's hauled off, what's the size? Is it 50% full, 100% full, and so forth? You look at that and you evaluate your hauling schedule. You may determine that you have an 8-yard dumpster, and whenever it's picked up, it's only half full. Well, you know what? Then go to a 4-yard dumpster, and it's cheaper, and you can pick up less too, which is less fossil fuel for the trucks to come and haul off your dumpster. To kind of redo that in your solid waste management plan is to do a waste audit. And sometimes depending on your waste hauler, like Republic or Waste Management, they will come do a free waste audit for you if you're a customer. And another thing very important I wanted to highlight is universal waste. Universal waste is your batteries and of course your lights that you have above. It's against the law, according to RCRA, to put your light bulbs in the trash. There's a proper way of collection and a proper way of disposal. I can help you more with that as well. A lot of web pages, I know, so we won't really go through them because in the sake of time. But once again, go to SF Tool, and there's a waste management module. I actually helped that module with my agency to define that and educate. TerraCycle, if you've heard of this company, as you know, most of our toothpaste containers, our yogurt containers, and our pens aren't accepted in the waste management, in our residential. But TerraCycle is a company there in Boston area that you can ship in wrappers, like your M&M wrappers, and Halloween's coming up soon, and they will recycle them for you and then make new products. Earth91.com is a wonderful web page that you can type in your zip code and it will recycle my mattress. It will tell you who in your area you can recycle your mattress with. Really great stuff. Retract.com is sponsored by the EPA, and actually I use this at work. That's where I report to the EPA our energy, water, and waste in that tool. And you actually can share with other entities as well. Let's say your organization, like I'm a Methodist, let's say the Methodist Church when it says to report and do like an award program, you can do it either through Energy Star or through Retract to have like a wonderful yearly awards program. Interesting enough, the middle right there is the U.S. Postal Service. They actually have a Blue Earth mail-in program for all your electronic waste. So what would be great at your organization is to collect all those, earplugs, those small electronics, put them in a box and mail them off for free, and they get recycled by an R3 certified recycler. Good deal and a good fundraiser and good education. Keep moving forward. Let's move on to purchasing. Cleaning. We all clean our organization. We all buy things for our offices and of course for our desks and chairs. Well, these are some products from my kitchen, and I usually have those X and O's, which ones are eco-friendly and not. But believe it or not, the microfibers are harmful to the environment. Just what it is, microfibers is plastic. Now, someone said earlier that you take plastic bottles and make t-shirts out of it. Great concept. But at the end of the day, just like my yoga pants, at the end of the day, those yoga pants, when I wash them, after a couple of times washing and putting in the dryer, the fibers, deteriorate. That's why we have lint in our dryers, because the fabrics are deteriorating. But some of those microfibers go into the water stream, into the wastewater treatment plants. And these wastewater treatment plants were designed in the 50s and 60s. They weren't designed with today's chemicals and today's synthetic materials. Therefore, it's very difficult to extract all these microfibers. What's happening? Going back to our water stream, and we are drinking them, as well as our wildlife and of course our vegetation. So really rethink the purchasing you do, especially in your kitchen areas, and the microfibers. As you can see there in the middle, that twist, that actually is bio-preferred cellulose material. I use that. I believe in the left-hand corner, that brown sponge thing is post-consumer material. Post-consumer material means, so it means post, which means after. That means that company, I think it was 3M actually, went and bought fibers and that are now they made into a new, so it's post-consumer. So it's kind of an interesting look at. Bio-preferred, right here, believe it or not, this is the USDA, bio-preferred materials and cleaning materials. You too can go to Target and buy a bio-preferred plant-based cleaning products. Let's go to the next slide actually. So here you go. I went to Target, took some pictures, and sure enough, I kind of want to show you what some stuff is. I buy 7th generation, non-bleached. And as you see on the package is 100% recycled bathroom tissue and post-consumer. I don't use trash bags, to be honest, but if you do buy trash bags, here is Seventh Generation. I believe it's 40% post-consumer. The Glad is not. What's misunderstood is that even though there is that recycling square, the triangle, that just means that the box it came in is recyclable, not the product inside is from post-consumer. The Tide, right there on the right-hand side, you may see right above the word Pure Clean is a emblem. That's a third-party vendor that came into Tide and said, yes, this is bio-preferred and you are certified. Just to let you know, in all of our federal buildings, and when I do my inspections, I look for that seal. And so yes, our federal government, our entities are actually using bio-preferred cleaning products in our buildings, and you can too. Next. Okay, continue on to purchasing. Believe it or not, and I don't know why we don't advertise this, the government has their own eBay, right? So what happens is every federal agency has to get rid of their desks and chairs and so forth. We just can't just sell it and get money or give it to the Boy Scouts or whatnot. We actually have to go through a process. It's a law. And those products have gone through the process and redeemed no value to the government now goes to called GSAauctions.gov. You're like, well, what is all on there? Just desks and chairs? No. The DEA, when they go to buildings and homes and they do a raid, that's not all government property. There are boats, there are homes, there are diamond rings, all kinds of things are on this GSA auctions. So it's one thing for you to do instead of going buying brand new, go to GSA auctions. How am I doing on time, Andrew? I think I'm okay. So
you've got a little bit more.
Okay. Let's go on to food. Did you know that the EPA does have a food recovery program? And I have had 2 cafeterias and 2 of my buildings in Dallas actually win national awards for their food donations. So it would be great that if your organization, had a celebration, instead of throwing the food out or giving it, obviously take it home, but actually donate it and partner with other local organizations as well. There's the Non-GMO Project. As you know, our food sources are modified and we're putting too much pesticides in our farm. And industrial farming is actually just destroying our soil content, our properties, and our air and our water. So kind of rethink the food that you do eat and consume, because we're eating too much preservatives that honestly our bodies are not properly, when we die, we're not properly, decomposing like we should, to be able to put it blunt. So kind of rethink what you're using. At the end, does Kelly eat almonds? As you know, almonds is the big craze. Almond milk, almond butter, eat my almonds and almond yogurt. No, I don't eat almonds. The reason why I don't eat almonds because almonds take the most water to produce of all the nuts. So I drink hemp milk, or I use pumpkin in my yogurt or my oatmeal. So kind of rethink once again, almonds are healthy. What is the environmental impact, the ecological footprint on eating almonds or eating walnuts and so forth? So in Kelly's world, if my dog can't eat it, if I can't compost it, I don't buy and I don't eat it. So here's my compost behind my shed. I took an old chain link fence. I took a wood pallet, and that is my homemade compost that I've had. It'll be 3 years in November. So everything goes in there, including my Tom's shoes. I'm doing a test. I had some Tom's shoes. I stick them in there. I can't find them. They actually decompose, which is fantastic. Back to education, how much water is needed to produce 1 kilogram of food? So kind of just rethink, even though we don't see the water, it's not tangible, water is still being used. As we saw earlier, we use the 0.3% of the water in the world to produce our foods and, in transportation and in our homes. So kind of just rethink that. I think it's a powerful slide. Did you know that the state of Virginia, every state has a DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality. And when you go to your state DEQ webpage, you're going to have a plethora of resources. I was just showing Andrew this earlier this week. So did you know that there are awards you can apply for? So just think, if you're applying for your green sanctuary in a certification, take that information and apply for these state awards. Wouldn't it be great for you to have 2 awards, your congregation and a state, or even the EPA? Using Energy Star. Fantastic. And it kind of gets you in the room into a mind frame and a transformation as well. So visit your local governments and your state governments. They have resources for water, energy, and waste. In fact, state of Arkansas, I contacted them and they came and did free solid waste audits for 5 of my federal buildings. Free. Because I just called and asked and talked to them. So you never know what you're going to do when you ask and the resources. And so there's a great partnership that we have with the state of Arkansas. I was actually really impressed with them. An action plan. To keep moving forward in the momentum, that transformation, you need an action plan. So based on your criterion for your green sanctuary, your focus on is religious education, sustainable living, environmental justice, and worship and celebration. So look at that and how can you move forward? So to kind of break it down, develop an operation plan. Develop a 1, 3, 5-year plan. If you want solar, okay, let's say in 5 years we want solar. So how are you going to set up your roof and your facilities to get that 5-year solar? If you want this, if you want native landscape to use less water, you just can't go to the nursery and buy all these plants. You have to have a plan so you can get there. So have that plan together, and that's how you educate and bring into the congregation and show that. So let's say you go and you're actually looking at your landscaping plan and you have a plan together. Then you know what? To bring into your worship and education, that every Sunday or whenever you want to meet, you have pamphlets educating that and sharing with us. So they take it back home. I'm working on my own church's operation plan. That's actually part of my Green Faith project, is to work on that. And just about done. Once again, what a great opportunity, across from my street is the Baptist church. So it would be great if my church partnered with the Baptist church and we had a yearly paper shredding day. And all those shredded papers we put into the flower beds and we take it home for compost and stuff like that. Neighborhood electronic recycling day. The city of Dallas, if you call them and partner with them, they will bring their hazardous waste vehicle and to your church, and you advertise it in the neighborhood in the city, and people come the universal waste and so forth. What you to do to continue the education, not only in your congregation, but in your neighborhood. Wonderful enough, Wikipedia, believe it or not, and I donate my $3 every month to Wikipedia. They have the environmental dates listed. It's all beyond Earth Day in April 22nd. You have National Air Day, which is in May. World Oceans Day. You have Elephant Day, which actually 2 weeks ago. Look at those environmental events and then add it to your congregation education and go from there. It's like the month of May is Air Quality Day. May 9th is typically Ride Your Bike to School Day. So wouldn't it be great that on that Saturday, everyone comes to church and rides their bikes in the neighborhood in celebration of clean air? And also with that, I think you can actually ride your bike to church. To kind of play on that and bring in the religion part of it, what it says in the Bible based on clean air, and then bring it into education. So without further ado, we all leave our footprints. What footprint do you want to leave? If you need further questions or comments, you can always email me and I will love to talk to you and move forward. So.
Thank you, Kelly.
In a nutshell.
As David and Dan have both said, yes, lots of great resources you gave us there. Lots of websites that basically people have the information we need to figure this out, and it's just a matter of us getting in touch with them.
And it's just a matter of knowing they're out there.
Yeah.
And that's just part of that, Did you know the government has their eBay? You
You can buy helicopters and planes on that, yeah.
You know, so it's just a lot of resources. Just sharing is caring, and in venues like this allow all of us to share what we know, so you can share to others. It's just wonderful. So,
Thank you.
anything particular else?
Any questions for Kelly?
I have a comment.
Sure.
There is so much love in this room, and it's so good to see. And love is a wavelength in and of itself that sheds light on the truth of new innovation and new understanding about what the problem is, whatever the problem is. And I just want to encourage this group to follow the path of love and truth, because there will always be new problems and consequently new solutions.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else in response to Kelly's presentation before we do our closing? Okay, so my thanks to all of our presenters today. Thank you for all of the information you've given us, all of the inspiration you've given us too. This really made this a wonderful event to be a part of today, and I'm very grateful to our presenters and all of you as participants as well. I hope this has been really valuable for you wherever you are in your individual and group faith journeys as well. And I think it's always helpful to end something like this by taking a little bit of time to think about what we are now going to do as a result of having been here. So I have a question for you to think about and then share your answer with us. What is one thing that you plan to do as an individual to become more green? What is something you've learned from this workshop that you are going to take with you and act upon now? And what is one thing you plan to do to help your faith community become more green? Again, what have you learned from this workshop that gives you inspiration or encouragement or knowledge that you can take back to your faith community to help move forward? Mason said an energy audit for his apartment. Certainly, seems like there's a lot to be learned from doing energy audits for both our homes where we live and for our houses of worship as well. Support a congregational effort on an energy audit. Do a waste audit. Yeah, we heard that from both Dan and Kelly. What is actually in our waste? Where is it going? And what is happening to it? Dan wrote, broaden our facility recycling program. Unplug things when not in use or out of town. There was a question earlier about what we do when it comes to unplugging things when the plug is behind furniture or something like that. I know that there were a couple of suggestions about power strips. Even turning off circuit breakers, I guess, would be one possibility. Develop a compost plan for our food pantry. Anytime you are making food or in the kitchen, there's going to be waste. As Dan said to me the other day, it's impossible to be zero waste. So the question is, where is that waste going? What are we doing with it? But composting on your own facility is a great thing to do. An operations plan for the church, talking about the sorts of things that Kelly was just talking about. Taking plastic bags to the grocery store, not putting them in the trash. Yeah, that was something that I learned in a presentation of Dan's a couple of months ago, how damaging plastic bags can be if they're in with other recyclables. But thankfully, a lot of grocery stores, libraries, schools, they now have collection points for plastic bags. Seth writes, add biochar to his website for developing world poverty relief. Yeah, I had to look up biochar when I first heard about it to learn what it can do. And usefulness of it going back into the soil, as well as using it for fuel and energy. Trex has a plastic film recycling program, all those plastic films that come on containers that would otherwise go in the trash. Learning more about air source heat pumps. A couple of our presenters talked about those. A way of either heating or cooling a space. And John writes a complete environmental program with his congregation in Fredericksburg, a collaboration going into the community as well. Yes, thinking outside of our own walls. There are some things that we cannot do by ourselves. And Martha writes that their Quaker meeting is moving towards becoming carbon neutral, made some progress, including an energy audit, but they've received much inspiration from this to help move forward, which is the sort of thing I wanted to hear as a result of offering this workshop today. So thank you, Martha. By Everspring Household Products. Could you say a bit more about Everspring? You can unmute if that would help. I haven't heard of Everspring before. Is that like 7th generation? Oh, it's the Target brand of sustainable products. Yes, Kelly showed us a few items on the shelves at Target. So an increasing number of stores now are responding to what they're hearing as the demand for sustainable products. Make contact with local public works staff for a presentation on local recycling challenges. Yeah, it helps to know how our municipalities work and how they're going to process what we give them so that we can make their lives easier and not keep breaking their equipment with what we're putting in the recycling. Working to get politicians elected that understand the crisis that climate change really is. Yes, again, it's the combination of individual and systemic change. There's a lot we can do as individuals. There's a lot we have to do at the system level, but that takes longer. And the possibility of awards, the sort of awards that Kendall talked about for cool congregations, ways to challenge ourselves and having a goal to shoot for as a congregation and as a community. Sometimes it's a bit daunting knowing everything that we really need to be doing. But if we can make it manageable and set ourselves goals that are not only challenging but fun to do, that can make a big difference as well. Any further thoughts about what you would like to do or what you plan to do going forward?
When are you going to make, it's John Bernard, when are you going to make this is going to be a recording, make this available?
Yes. So it takes Zoom a little bit of time to process the recording, and then they send me an email when it's ready. So probably by the end of the weekend, that should happen. Most of our presenters have put their presentations into the shared Google folder. So I will put the recordings into that and then send out a link to everybody. That will be a folder that you can just open from your computer by clicking on the link. You won't have to have a login or anything like that. And then everything in that, you can either open it in your browser or you can just download it directly.
You'll be sending that as an attachment on an email?
Yes, I'll be sending that out by email to everybody who's registered for this.
What, in September sometime?
Hopefully within a few days.
All right, great, thank you.
Go out. You're welcome. Couple more things we want to do: intergenerational conversation and planning, and participate in the climate strike. Yeah, I was making notes about a number of things that are coming up. Martin, in his video, talked about the 2019 Time for Living the Change, which runs September through December. That includes the new global meeting, the COP in Chile in December. It includes the climate strike in September. It includes the Interfaith Power and Light's Climate in the Pulpits program with an emphasis on environmental justice in November. So if anybody else knows of other upcoming events happening in that time frame, I'll be happy to include those in the email that I will send out to everybody. I know that here in Newport News, we have a Go Green Expo coming up in a couple of weekends. We seem to be gathering more momentum as a society, thankfully, to learn more about these things and address them, which is always good to know that you're not the only one trying to make a difference. But people are talking about this, people are trying to figure out what to do. So I hope today has been useful in terms of giving you lots of ideas about what to do and encouraging you in this work as well. So that's about it from me. Thank you all so much for having been part of this today. Thank you, Corey and Kendall and David and Kelly and Dan for being presenters. You will be hearing from me within a few days, hopefully by email, with the recording for this workshop, as well as the various other resources that our presenters have provided. Lots of great websites to go and find out more information from. So thank you all very much for participating. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Please do ring your bells at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And I will see you somewhere in person or online.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank
Great
you,
job.
everybody.